We now come to the general debate on remembrance and the contribution of veterans, and I call the Minister to move, Secretary of State for Defence, John Healey.
Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this House has considered remembrance and the contribution of veterans. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is the first time in 4 years that the House is holding a general debate on remembrance. Back then, I responded for the opposition, and it is a huge honour for me to be able to open this debate today as Secretary of State for Defence, and it's an honour for me in this role to serve as the voice of veterans in the Cabinet. And I am very proud, Madam Deputy Speaker, to have my ministerial team here with me, and in particular the Minister for Veterans and People, who will wind up this debate at the end of our discussions. Madam Deputy Speaker, the number of colleagues from all sides who've put in to speak in this debate means that I wish to keep my remarks brief so that we can hear from others. And what is also striking is the number of colleagues from all sides on the call list who have served in our UK Armed Forces. Many elected for the first time back in July. So I welcome them all to this debate. And I think this underlines the deep affinity between this House and our nation's armed forces. Whether or not we've served, we in this House have the interests of our armed forces at heart, however we may debate forcefully at times the state of our armed forces and how best to use them. And this matters. This matters to those who put on the uniform and those who accept the unlimited service to our nation of being ready to do anything at any time, anywhere, if this House and His Majesty's Government will it.
On that point.
Of course.
During the Troubles in Northern Ireland, hundreds of thousands of British servicemen served on Operation Banner. Hundreds were killed. Thousands were maimed by both Republican and Loyalist bombs. I respect the Right Honourable Gentleman, but how can his government now repeal the Northern Ireland Legacy Bill and throw many of those veterans to the wolves in order to pander to Sinn Féin? What is noble about that?
The Legacy Bill is without supporters from any side of the communities in Northern Ireland, which is one of the reasons that it should be repealed. And in that process of repeal, we will take fully into account the concerns of veterans, the place of those veterans and their families who have given such service, as the Right Honourable Gentleman quite rightly says to the House this afternoon. Madam Deputy Speaker, Remembrance Sunday and Armistice Day are a moment when the nation... I will give way.
I'm very grateful to the Defence Secretary, and he's always very courteous. I would just like to say that when the previous iteration of the Defence Committee did an in-depth report onto the question of the best way forward after the Troubles, and we produced a report called Drawing a Line, which recommended the ending of prosecutions but the substitution of a truth recovery process. And I had people from, shall we say, some of the Northern Irish parties who would feel compelled to condemn this on the floor of the House, but quietly would come up to me afterwards and admit that it was the only way forward. So just because there's this performative condemnation by different communities, he shouldn't be diverted from the fact that what was good enough for Nelson Mandela in South Africa should be good enough for us.
Madam Deputy Speaker, for me, one of the great strengths of this House and this place is the work of the all-party select committees. And the Right Honourable Gentleman's Committee during that time did the House and the cause, the wider cause of peace and reconciliation in Northern Ireland a service. We will take those points into account, as we will. And I have to say to him, I don't think anybody could point a finger at the current Northern Ireland Secretary and say he is not a serious figure or could remotely be accused of performative politics. He will take very seriously his duty to lead this process of repealing the Legacy Bill, the Legacy Act, and finding a way forward that takes everybody with them. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, Remembrance Sunday is indeed a moment when the nation comes together to honour those who have served, those who have fought, and above all, those who have made the ultimate sacrifice with their lives to defend our country, to preserve our freedoms, and to protect our way of life. And so to all those who serve and have served, on behalf of the country, I offer a profound thank you. Madam Deputy Speaker, this will be the first time that many new members will have the privilege of representing their constituency at Remembrance parades, ceremonies and services. I encourage all to play the fullest part, and I encourage all to go into their schools to join in the lessons and projects that will be taking place in the run-up also to Remembrance Day, because Remembrance isn't just an opportunity to show our gratitude and pride, it's an opportunity to learn, to teach the next generation about the service and the sacrifice of those who came before. And when we consider that the number of veterans in this country will fall by 1/3 during this decade, it's clear we need to do more at all levels to reinforce the country's understanding of and commitment to our armed forces. And this has never been more important in this year that we mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day and many of the major battles which led to the end of the Second World War. A weekend just passed in which we marked a decade since the conclusion of UK combat operations in Afghanistan. And during this remembrance, we honoured the 457 British service personnel who lost their lives, the thousands who were wounded, and their families during that time who bore such a burden. I will give way to one point.
Minister, I'm ever reminded, and thank the Minister for his contribution today, and is a very honest and honourable person. I'm conscious of the fact that when it comes to justice for those who served in uniform, I declare an interest, Madam Deputy Speaker, as one who served in the Ulster Defence Regiment for 3 years and the Royal Artillery for 14.5 years total. My cousin was murdered on the 10th of December 1971. No one ever made accountable for his murders. The IRA men who killed him run across the border to the Republic of Ireland to sanctuary and safety. The 4 UDR men murdered at Ballydugan on the 9th of April 1990. No one made accountable for their murders. And it grieves me greatly on behalf of those people to know that there's some people still walking about who have never been made accountable in this world for what they have done. I want to see justice. Does the Minister want to see justice for them people as well? Thank you.
Well, look, Madam Deputy Speaker, I had moved on actually to Afghanistan, but the Honourable Gentleman, in his very forceful way, makes his point. It's on the record now, and I want to move on, and I want to use this remembrance period and this debate also to pay tribute to the very special service charities that we have in the UK. They work week in, week out to raise funds, to promote awareness, and to provide services to support our armed forces and veterans, and they do so all year round. And at this, I will give way one final time, and then I'm going to finish my remarks so that the House can hear from the very many who wish to speak as well.
Oh, sorry. Who's he giving way to? All right. Thank you. Sorry, Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you very much to the Secretary of State. Mentioning the good works of charities, I was reminded earlier, obviously my base in North Devon, Royal Marines Base Chivenor, and the Colonel Simpson, who's the Garrison Commando, is very supportive of service charities, including the RMA, the Royal Marines Association. Would the Secretary of State please say happy birthday to the Royal Marines Corps as they celebrate their 360th birthday today?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm so glad I did give away for one final time. I'd sort of left that to my honourable friend, who I'm sure will have something to say about that. But can I respond to the honourable gentleman's invitation, and on behalf of the whole House? What a remarkable service! What a remarkable feat! 360 years. 360 years proud today. We honour them. We wish them well in the future too, and say a big happy birthday. Yeah. And Madam Deputy Speaker, at this time of year, we see the particular contribution, of course, of the Royal British Legion and the importance of the Legion's Poppy Appeal. So let us recognise, if we may, the commitment in particular of the hundreds of volunteers across the country who recruit the poppy sellers, who organise the shifts, who check the stock, who account for the donations, and who encourage the public to give and to wear poppies at this time of year with such pride. Thank you on behalf of us all to them. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, we know these are serious times. War in Europe, conflict in the Middle East, growing Russian aggression and increasing threats elsewhere. And as this world becomes more dangerous, we will rely more heavily on the professionalism and courage of our armed forces. And it is against this backdrop that the government is committed to renewing the nation's contract with those who serve. We've already been able to announce the largest pay increase for our forces in over 20 years, and I am the first Defence Secretary who can stand in this House and say everyone in uniform in the UK Armed Forces will be paid now at least the national minimum living wage. Yeah. And it's why we've announced in our first King's Speech legislation to introduce an independent Armed Forces Commissioner to improve service life for those service personnel and their families. I will give way, because the honourable gentleman is particularly persistent and despite his youthful looks has been in this House for some time.
True enough, and I'm sure I should know better. I'm very, very grateful to him, though, for giving way. Recruiting and retaining good people who will serve our country is made a little easier if they know they will be cared for in the years after they've left active service. Would he say something about the importance in investing in mental health support for veterans, and in particular perhaps say a word of congratulations to One Vision, the charity in my constituency, which provides counselling support for the armed forces and all those in uniform work to make sure we value them in the years after they have been actively serving us?
Yeah. I will indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I mean, the honourable gentleman is right, of course. The support services that are there for our veterans who need it aren't just what the government can help provide, and on mental health through Op Courage, but through the network of first-class local charities. And if One Vision is playing a part of, in that, in his part in Cumbria, I certainly pay tribute to them. I think there's a more profound reason for doing this, if I may say so, this concern, quite rightly, for support for our veterans, and it's this. I think we need to recognise that the confidence of those in the armed forces now, on deployment, to act decisively on behalf of the nation can be motivated and reinforced by how they see the nation supporting their veterans back home. And that's why we pledged in our manifesto back in July that we'll improve access to support for our veterans, including mental health, employment and housing. And it's why we've committed to put the Armed Forces Covenant fully into law. It's why within the first 3 months of taking office we have delivered on the commitment to make the Veterans ID card an accepted form of voter ID. And it's why the Prime Minister in his first conference speech also announced that veterans will be exempt from rules that require a connection to the local area before able to access housing. Because in the end, Madam Deputy Speaker, at the heart of our national security will always be the men and women who serve this country. And so, as we consider this debate, it's an opportunity to reflect on what we mean when we talk about remembrance. It's an opportunity to recognise the immense contribution that our veterans, serving members of the armed forces and the families who support them make to this country. Hundreds of thousands have answered the nation's call and given their lives in doing so. We honour them. We will remember them.
The question is that this House has considered remembrance and the contribution of veterans, and I call Shadow Minister James Cartlidge.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I join with the Secretary of State in congratulating our brilliant Royal Marines on their 360th anniversary. This is a timely and important debate coinciding with Mr Speaker's official opening of the Constituency Garden Remembrance earlier today. It marks the point where, as a House, we pay tribute to all those who serve and have served our country, and in particular, those who paid the ultimate sacrifice for doing so. As we approach Remembrance Day, I wish to thank the Royal British Legion and charities across the UK who ensure that our collective memory of the fallen never fades, whilst supporting today's veterans with invaluable services and support. I'm also proud of the record of the last government on veterans, which my colleague, the Shadow Veterans Minister, will cover in his closing speech. But I wanted to focus primarily on the remembrance part of this debate. I believe that for politicians, we best honour the fallen by never forgetting the lessons of the wars in which they fought. That means never being complacent about the threats we face and doing everything possible to strengthen our deterrence so that this country is never again embroiled in the senseless slaughter of existential war. But it must be obvious to all of us that the threat of such a war is looming larger over our continent than it has done for many years. To that end, and I say this with respect for the Secretary of State, when deterrence is of paramount importance, it's in my view, it was profoundly ill-judged of him to suggest that Britain is not ready to fight a war. Let me reassure the British public, Madam Deputy Speaker, millions of whom will soon be wearing their poppies with pride, that they can be absolutely assured that our armed forces remain among the best in the world. After all, it would be wholly unrealistic to expect this nation to single-handedly fight Russia on its own. The challenge is to be ready to fight and deter as part of NATO, and nobody should be in any doubt whatsoever about the outsized scale of our contribution to the alliance. First and foremost, 24/7, we unambiguously and unflinchingly offer our nuclear deterrent for the defence of all European NATO allies, and are incredibly proud to have delivered a continuous sea deterrent every day since 1969. Moreover, when NATO undertook Exercise Steadfast Defender earlier this year, its largest such exercise since the end of the Cold War, we led the way with 20,000 service personnel. We contributed 8 warships and submarines, an aircraft carrier, plus tanks, artillery, helicopters and Poseidon 8 P-8 surveillance aircraft, not the contribution of a nation unable to fight. But as we prepare to look back and remember the conflicts of the past, the most important example of our readiness is not an exercise, but a war happening this very day in the real world on our continent. When it comes to Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine, this country, under the previous government, played a singular role of standout leadership which started before the Russian tanks rolled in, training thousands of Ukrainians to fight since 2014 and providing absolutely crucial anti-tank weaponry before the invasion had commenced, which helped the Ukrainians defy expectations and stay in the fight. Surely, we can all see that if Ukraine had fallen early, the world would have been an even more dangerous place than it is, with our adversaries emboldened and NATO's borders potentially threatened. So as the previous Secretary of State Grant Shapps revealed, President Zelensky says the UK has been responsible more than any other nation for helping to ensure that the majority of Ukraine remains free more than 2 years after Russia's main attack. So far from talking down our armed forces, we should be extremely proud of the role we have played in supporting Ukraine's fight for freedom. Now that said, Madam Deputy Speaker, of course we have our challenges. First and foremost is the need to replenish munitions, not least after gifting so many to Ukraine in the first place. That's why in April we set out a fully funded plan to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP by 2030, paid for by reducing the civil service back to its pre-pandemic size and prioritising £10 billion additional funding for replenishment. I give way to the gentleman.
I thank the Minister for giving way. Does he think that the Conservative Party is missing the point of this debate by scoring political points?
Well, I think the Honourable Gentleman is missing the point of my speech, Madam Deputy Speaker. I said at the beginning I want to talk about remembrance, and I sincerely believe the best way we honour the fallen is to learn the lessons of the past. And that means to always stand up for our country and have the strongest possible deterrence, which is why it really does matter to this debate that we talk about defence spending with a budget on Wednesday. This is a matter of supreme national interest. And as we prepare to remember all those lives lost serving in our Navy and our merchant fleet, this replenishment would have addressed key emerging threats to our naval ships that have been exposed in the Red Sea, such as funding Dragonfire laser procurement to tackle drones and upgrading our Sea Viper system to cope with ballistic missiles. I have to say, if people think that's not relevant, Madam Deputy Speaker, when we think of all the tragedy we saw in the Falklands, when we lost those ships, we should be doing everything possible to urgently procure those systems that can help defend our ships today to the new threats we are seeing emerging, such as in the Red Sea. Another key challenge is, of course, retention. We know we need to do everything possible to support those who serve in our armed forces today. But that being so, and 2 days from the budget, I hope that the Secretary of State will have read the Online Times today and its warning that hundreds may leave the armed forces because of the government's education tax. The article quotes the many service personnel who have emailed me with their concerns, such as the wife of an army major who writes, "The extra 20% will make things extremely difficult, and we fear we'll have to choose between my husband's career or our daughter's education." Now, Labour shouldn't be forcing thousands of military families to make so stark a choice when we cannot afford to lose such experienced personnel, and when it costs almost £48,000 per head to train just one much less experienced replacement. Now, finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, when it comes to our people, there is the key issue of accommodation. I am proud of the additional £400 million that our government injected to help with damp and mould and the many other problems that routinely affect our military homes. However, as someone with a background in housing before Parliament, it was clear to me from day one, as the Minister responsible for the Defence Estate, that we had to do something far more radical given the inherent structural problems of so much of our service accommodation. That's why I built on the work of my predecessor Jeremy Quinn to put the wheels in motion so that we could, subject to negotiation, buy back the Defence Estate from Annington Homes. If we really want homes fit for heroes, as I'm sure we all do, my strong belief is that we need a complete rebuild of the Defence Estate rather than year-to-year sticking plaster solutions. It could be one of the country's most exciting regeneration projects, but requires ownership to be fully restored, and that means Annington. Of course, Annington is an area of considerable legal and commercial sensitivity, so I don't expect a direct answer on this subject, but I do hope the government will continue to build on the considerable work I put in this area. To conclude, if we are truly to honour the fallen, we must do everything to avoid future conflict by having the strongest possible deterrence. I have huge respect for the Secretary of State, but I believe it was a mistake to say that we are not ready to fight. And we now need to judge the Secretary of State to see if he is ready to fight for our armed forces. In the budget on Wednesday, we need two things. First, an exemption from VAT on school fees for forces families. And secondly, a clear pathway to spending 2.5% of GDP on defence so that we can urgently replenish our munition stocks to war-fighting levels. Those who serve our country deserve no less.
And I call the Chair of the Defence Select Committee, Singh, Dhesi.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise today, like many honourable members, here to express my immense gratitude and admiration for all our veterans of today and yesteryear. But I also rise today from a very different angle as the representative of Slough, one of the most ethnically diverse constituencies, and as the first turban Sikh elected to Parliament with a very specific duty. A duty, Madam Deputy Speaker, to speak out for those who have often been relegated to the footnotes of history, but whose sacrifices must not be sidelined. It's more important than ever, Madam Deputy Speaker, particularly having seen our streets recently filled with far-right hatred, that remembrance is not exclusive. The contribution of all those who sacrificed their lives must be remembered. It cannot be ignored in particular that both world wars could not have been won by British-born troops alone without the contribution of soldiers beyond our own borders. In World War I, Madam Deputy Speaker, approximately 2 million brave soldiers from Commonwealth countries laid down their lives to protect ours. 166 African servicemen were decorated in recognition of their valour. British West Indies Regiment were awarded with 81 medals and 51 dispatches, mentions in dispatches. More than 1.5 million people from what is modern-day India, Pakistan and Bangladesh contributed to the war effort, a largely voluntary army of Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs and many others. Indeed, today, over 11% of our current forces are from ethnic minorities. If we fail to properly commemorate, Madam Deputy Speaker, and celebrate the contribution of our armed forces, whose roots may lie in countries across the globe, we are doing our own history a huge disservice. Coming from a strong military background myself, my great-grandfather lost a leg fighting in the First World War, my grandmother's brother and others fought in the Second World War. I know the immense pride I feel in that shared history. It's staggering that despite making up just 2% of pre-partition British India, Sikhs formed 20% of the Indian Army. I'm immensely proud of those who fought so valiantly and believe such a contribution should be properly commemorated. It's why I have passionately campaigned for several years and serve as president of the National Sikh War Memorial Trust for a befitting memorial for those Sikh soldiers in central London to remember the tens of thousands of turbaned Sikhs who sacrificed their lives and the more than 100,000 injured during both World Wars. We must ensure remembrance serves as a reminder to all the freedoms that we enjoy today were hard fought by forces as diverse as modern-day Britain. We cannot airbrush the past, despite the efforts of some right-wing commentators to do just that. In 2020, Madam Deputy Speaker, Kevin Maguire from the Mirror and I had to educate Lauren Fox on Sikh sacrifices during World War I, following his bigoted comments that the film 1917 was somehow woke, somehow racist for its inclusion of Sikh soldiers. To his credit, he later apologised after he'd been hit with some hard facts. But it's this ignorance that has rooted in much of culture of remembrance and must be challenged, because even today forces who stood shoulder to shoulder with British troops still struggle to get the recognition they deserve. But I'm no doubt my right honourable friend the Defence Secretary will rectify that. Gurkhas' pensions, for example, falling short of the army standard. The fight it took to get certain visa fees scrapped for non-UK service personnel. Recent errors in the Arab scheme, leaving triples forced out in the cold, the pervasive racism that caused a failure to equally treat 54,000 World War I casualties from India, West and East Africa, Egypt and Somalia. An important matter which my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, campaigned so effectively on. But there should not be another battle to simply get parity. Instead, those who served alongside British troops should be a beacon of hope for a collective pride that goes beyond borders, colour or background. Their commitment to our country meant they were willing to sacrifice everything for it. These contributions should be celebrated, Madam Deputy Speaker, not sidelined. It's this very commitment in the darkest of times that ensures our safety. Fundamentally, without the sacrifices and contributions of the millions of personnel from across the globe, we simply would not have the privilege of sitting here today. And they have ensured our collective freedom. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, freedom to operate under a democracy, freedom to live and live in a multi-plural society, freedom to be safe. We must never take these hard-won freedoms for granted, and it's simply not enough to be thankful, Madam Deputy Speaker. We must celebrate their service, honour their duty, and always remember those who have made the ultimate sacrifice on behalf of our nation. We will remember them.
I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson Helen Maguire.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. So today we gather to honour the sacrifices and contributions of our veterans. Brave men and women who selflessly put their lives on the line for our country. Each one of them embodies the courage, resilience and dedication that define the spirit of service. But it's not just about recognising their service on the battlefield, but also understanding the challenges they continue to face once they return home. So I'd like to start with a bit of my own story. I served in the British Army as part of the Royal Military Police. I didn't come from a military family. My journey began with a desire to lead, to travel and to make a difference. I studied languages at university and was drawn to the British Army's role in international aid and disaster relief. I thought it would eventually lead me into humanitarian work. Training at Sandhurst was gruelling, and especially with equipment that really wasn't designed for women. But I came out of that experience with friendships that lasted a lifetime, people who saw me through my highest and my lowest points. After Sandhurst, I was deployed to Bosnia, where my platoon was already stationed as part of the Stabilisation Force, S4, a NATO peacekeeping force. Working alongside American, British, Canadian, Czech and Dutch troops, I witnessed firsthand the disparities in resources and funding. The contrast was stark. Our American counterparts had advanced equipment, all the bells and whistles, and we operated with much less. This showed me not only the resilience of our troops, but also the challenges we faced due to limited resources. Shortly after that, I was sent to Iraq on Operation Telic 4 with the 1st Battalion Princess of Wales Royal Regiment. Tasked with retraining the Iraqi police force, supporting policing efforts to train over 1,200 of the Iraqi police service in Maysan province, a volatile and dangerous area. We trained the police outside our camp, in old air bases with exploded ordnance next to us, and visit police stations supporting the IPS with their work. We distributed cars, equipment, weapons and money to the IPS and gathered intelligence on Iranian weapons smuggling. Yet just a year before my arrival, 6 of my RMP colleagues were killed in Majar al-Kabir. At just the age of 26, I vividly remember the fear of my first night. Travelling in a blackout bus after landing in Maysan en route to Camp Abanaji, really unsure of what lay ahead. A fear I imagine many soldiers face today, the fear of the unknown, the fear of what's to come, especially those on the front line in places like Ukraine. Iraq was not easy. We came under fire regularly, and some of my fellow soldiers didn't make it home. Tensions escalated when photos published falsely showing British soldiers abusing Iraqi detainees. So for several days, our base was surrounded by angry, armed locals. There's a lot of tension, but we got through it together. Now, on the base, there was over 1,000 soldiers, only 3 female officers and a handful of female NCOs. The one positive thing about that was that at least I could get to the toilet and the shower without queue. Despite all these challenges, I was absolutely grateful for the brave interpreters, local police and all the other locals that worked with us on camp and out on the ground. And we must also remember the sacrifices that local people on operations make to support our armed forces abroad. After returning to the UK, we started a family, and I had to make a choice between family and career. With no military support to help balance these responsibilities, I eventually left the army earlier than I planned. Yet this is too common a story. As the Haythorne-Waite report highlighted, the most common reason that service members leave the armed forces is the impact on family and personal life. But there were no options for me as a mother. For me, next it would have been Afghanistan, and there are no nurseries on the front line there. There was no flexible career path for me, and I'm not alone, because many service members face pressures that extend beyond the battlefield, and we simply need to do more to support them. So I'm immensely proud of my constituency's connection to the armed forces. We have Langley Vale, where over 8,000 soldiers trained during the First World War, and it was where Lord Kitchener famously inspected the troops, and it now serves as a place of reflection with beautiful sculptures honouring our military past. Our local Royal Engineers, the 135 Geographic Squadron, they recently celebrated their 75th anniversary this year, proudly marching with bayonets fixed, exercising their freedom of Epsom and Ewell. And these are really powerful reminders of the sacrifices made by generations of service members. But honouring our veterans goes beyond remembrance. It's about action. There are pressing issues we must address to ensure that veterans and their families are supported after their service. And housing is one of these such issues. It's unacceptable that over 2,000 households with a veteran were assessed as homeless last year. High-quality, affordable accommodation for veterans should be accessible across the country. No one who served our nation should face homelessness. Yeah. Winter fuel allowance is another concern. Many veterans struggle financially, and recent cuts to this allowance will hit some of them hard. It's a lifeline, especially in colder months, and veterans should be able to rely on this support. Military compensation also needs reform. The current system often counts military compensation towards mean-tested benefits, and in 2022, about 150,000 veterans received this compensation for injuries sustained during service. But many councils count this as income, penalising veterans who desperately need support, and this practice goes against the Armed Forces Covenant, and it's time we change these rules. Yeah. As my honourable member also mentioned, we need to improve mental health support for veterans.
Right honourable friend give way.
I will give way.
Thank you. And thank you for giving way. Will my right honourable friend agree with me that the government should give serious thought about excluding military compensation when calculating pensioner credit?
Yes, I agree with my honourable member. So, returning to mental health support for veterans, more than half of veterans have faced mental health challenges, yet 60% hesitate to seek that due to stigma. To help reduce stigma and encourage more veterans to seek the support they need, we need regular mental health checkups for veterans, along with better tracking of both physical and mental health outcomes. Female veterans also face additional challenges, including higher unemployment rates and a greater risk of harassment. The Atherton report found that nearly two-thirds of female veterans experience bullying or harassment during service. This is unacceptable, and we must implement recommendations to protect and support women who serve. Yeah. And finally, for our LGBT plus veterans, they deserve justice. Those dismissed because of their sexuality are being offered compensation of $12,500, which is wholly insufficient and fails to reflect the harm they endured. The government must reassess this scheme to ensure these veterans receive fair compensation. We thank all those charities who support our armed forces, and we remember those who have fallen. But in conclusion, as we remember the contributions of those who have served, let us honour their sacrifices with action. We need a system that truly supports our service personnel, veterans and their families. This means addressing issues ranging from housing and pay to diversity and equality. Our veterans deserve not just our respect, but also our commitment to making a real difference in their lives. Thank you.
Yeah. I will now be imposing an immediate time limit of 3 minutes for backbench speeches and 6 minutes for maiden speeches. And I call Jodie Gosling for her maiden speech.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the opportunity to give my maiden speech in this important remembrance and commemoration debate. It is a great privilege that I have been chosen by the people of Nuneaton, my home, to represent them in this chamber, and I understand the weight of responsibility that I now have, and I will work hard to bring about the change that we need to thrive. My journey to this place has been indirect, and there have been many individuals who have supported and inspired me along the way. The excellent campaign support so willingly given by our local members and the kindness, goodwill and advice of my constituents. I need to give credit to my family too. Being the 6th of 7 siblings, I will not try and do this individually, but I do need to reflect on my mum's incredible work ethic and compassion, and my dad's sense of fun and drive for ensuring that education was at the heart of our family. Similarly, my children are my greatest source of inspiration. Our legacy will be their future, and I thank them and my partner for joining us here today. I must also thank them for their enduring understanding, patience and unwavering support. Nuneaton is a beautiful town, and I'm proud to call it home. It is steeped in a rich history which stretches back to the Doomsday, Originally simply referred to as Eton, meaning the river, the town by the river, recognising the significance of our river anchor. With the 12th century addition of a nunnery, it simply became Nun Eton Priory, and there the name was formed. Soon after, Henry II gave us our market charter, and the market town that we know and love today began to develop. It is the largest town in Warwickshire, nestled in beautiful rolling hills and stunning countryside. Our coal industry was the economic bedrock from the 19th century until the closure of Daw Mill in 2013, which called an abrupt end to this era. Nuneaton's sense of pride and duty is never clearer, though, than in its service record. Nuneaton is home to many members in armed forces and veterans. This year, we welcomed our first Nepalese councillor, Bim Saru, to Nuneaton and Bedworth and congratulated Ungarung on the first Gurkha to become the freeman of our town. His work is truly inspirational. A Gurkha monument in Riversley Park, the first memorial of its kind to be dedicated to the brave Nepalese and Indian soldiers that lost their lives in the service of the British forces. Those who visit Riversley Park will also find Louis' playground. It was where Louis Carter played as a child. Louis, a son of Nuneaton, well-represented cadet, and following completion of his training, joined the Royal Fusiliers and was deployed to Helmand Province. There he was known as a friendly, loyal and kind member of his platoon, but whilst out on patrol, his platoon leader was caught in an IED blast. Fusilier Louis Carter acted to aid his comrade, but fell foul to a secondary device. He was just 18 years of age. His companionship, insurmountable courage and sense of service continues to live on as we remember him. The people of Nuneaton are proud of Louis and all of our fallen sons and daughters. Our local British Legion works tirelessly to support their families and commemorate their lives. Special credit needs to be given to Laurie Payne, Nuneaton's last surviving Korean War veteran, who will celebrate his 96th birthday on Remembrance Sunday this year, and reportedly still outsells all other members on his poppy sale. I must also pay credit and thanks to my predecessor, the Right Honourable Marcus Jones, who represented this House for 14 years. In common with the residents of Treacletown, he believed in common sense and hard work and was respected for his civility on both sides of this House. Any account of Nuneaton today needs to recognise the challenges facing a town where its traditional industries can no longer support the large numbers of residents it once did. The willingness of those impacted to retrain, diversify and reinvent themselves as work moves into engineering, digital and scientific areas shows admirable skills needed to embrace the opportunities of evolving industrial landscape. Nuneaton's central location and connectivity provide logistical opportunities, just as the canals once did to our textiles. Despite the many challenges Nuneaton has faced, its resilience shines through. It is a town of opportunity and hope. I must congratulate Nuneaton Signs for their recent King's Award for Inclusion. Not only are they one of the leading road sign manufacturers in the country, but they also boast an inclusion record, with having over 66% of its staff identify as having a disability. They are truly a brilliant company that represent our communities. We celebrate also the town's diverse culture, a thriving art community, the Abbey Theatre, and a hugely generous spirit that can be seen throughout our various charities and our dazzling annual carnival. As the first female MP of Nuneaton, I must also give credit to one of the trailblazers who went before me, opening up these opportunities. Mary Ann Evans, more commonly known as her writing for George Eliot, was born just down the road from me. She wrote under a male name in order to attempt to free herself from discrimination of readers and publishers. Her books opened public discussions on areas like domestic violence, the status of women, poverty, political reform and addiction and education, issues that are still as relevant 2 centuries later. Thank you.
I call Sarah Bool.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For me, Remembrance is a deeply humbling time of year and an opportunity to reflect on the freedoms and privileges that we often take for granted in this country. Freedom of speech, the rule of law and democracy. Values for which our forefathers fought bravely for. And each generation must make sacrifices to ensure that their children can live in freedom. And we see this most clearly today in Eastern Europe, where Ukraine fights to defend itself from the barbaric assault on its democracy by Putin's Russia. My constituency of South Northamptonshire is filled with monuments to the heroes of the past, and I look forward this year to marking their sacrifice by attending the Toaster Remembrance service at St Lawrence Church, the Brackley service at Winchester House School, and the Active Remembrance in Beaujeu Cemetery. I will also join the local branch of the Royal British Legion to sell poppies. Since my election to this place, I have joined the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, and I have had the opportunity to see firsthand how crucial it is that we support our serving men and women properly. In a world where the threats are rising, we should be investing more in our armed forces, not less. I was proud to stand on a manifesto committed to raising defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, and I am disappointed that the Labour government cannot make this same outright commitment. Our veterans are the very best of us and should be given the right support to transition out of active duty and into civilian life. Madam Deputy Speaker, the previous government put a Veterans Minister around the Cabinet table for the first time, tackled veteran homelessness through Operation Fortitude, created a dedicated veterans' mental health pathway in Operation Courage, and introduced the Veterans' Rail Card. Madam Deputy Speaker, if we are to honour the sacrifice of those who came before us, if we are to keep our promise to make the UK the best place to be a veteran, and if we are to ensure that the cause of freedom is defended around the world, we must fund our armed forces properly.
Tomlinson to make his maiden speech.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I start by praising the member for Nuneaton for a fantastic maiden speech. I must say, with others on this side of the House, Nuneaton is seared into my memory because of its role in the 2015 general election. It's nice now to have to be able to think of such a fantastic speech when I think of Nuneaton. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to also pay tribute to my predecessor in Chipping Barnet, the previous MP who served with much hard work and diligence over her 19 years of service. Teresa Villiers was a hard-working Member of Parliament, and I hope to follow in her footsteps in that regard. Let me also say, to begin, that just yesterday I was with the members of the East Barnet branch of the Royal British Legion, and I thought then, as we think now, of all those who've given their lives and their livelihoods over to service and to keeping our country safe. Chipping Barnet is not, as some may assume, in the Cotswolds, home to Chipping Norton and Jeremy Clarkson's farm, although we do have 14 farms in the constituency. We are, in fact, a suburb of London, part of the London Borough of Barnet, and it's the suburbs that I would like to speak on today. For it's my contention that when a political party understands the suburbs, then and only then is it able to speak on behalf and govern for the country as a whole. Let me give you just a little bit of history on Chipping Barnet. You can go back to the 1700s, and if you were a weary traveller trying to make your way out of London on the Great North Road northwards, you would find that your natural resting point for your first night's stay would be Chipping Barnet, where no fewer than 25 public houses were in existence to put you up for the night. Now I will make sure to continue to support and to patronise the pubs in Chipping Barnet during my time in office. Roll forward 200 years and you get to the extension of the Northern Line to the constituency, joining us up with the City of London proper. And I must say that with a relatively liberal planning system pre-1947, that connectivity enabled a surge of house building. Which members on this side, I'm sure, will think about when we seek to build and invest for the future. Now, Chipping Barnet, as I said, is home to wonderful farms and green spaces, and many of us locally moved to Barnet, just like myself, because we value a house with a garden, room to raise the kids, and maybe even space to park the car out the front, the aspirations of suburban life. And let me just say briefly to people of faith in the constituency, I just want to pause to say how grateful I've been for the warmth I've been received in churches and synagogues and mosques, and to say particularly to Jewish and Muslim residents that I will always stand with you against the anti-Semitism and the Islamophobia that I know has been on the rise in recent months and over the past year. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's important to do good work locally as a Member of Parliament, but it's my firm belief that we must raise our game in this House and raise our game nationally if we are to truly make a difference for our constituents. The need for change is great. Gone are the days when a child could grow up in a low-income family on free school meals, just like I did, but with the security of a social security system that was there for them and genuinely affordable social housing. You see, representing the suburbs is also about standing up for the people who can't afford to and who do not commute into town, just as much as it is about representing those who do. The aspiration is still there for a better life for their families and for their community, but that aspiration is not being met. I talk, in fact, of the deal of suburban life. People who put in so much, who spend their time stuck in traffic or on the Northern Line, who raise their kids to teach them right from wrong, who serve in their communities, who work hard, and expect that in return, government will just get some things right. We'll provide for public services that are there for you when you need them. We'll make sure that the economy is strong and growing. Now, I've seen that deal fall apart somewhat during my time before entering this House. As an economist, I worked at the Treasury for a time, then at the Resolution Foundation and the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. I saw that deal fall apart in charts and in numbers on spreadsheets. But since becoming a parliamentary candidate and now a Member of Parliament, I've heard firsthand from constituents in the suburbs about how that deal has fallen apart. I think of young people who can't afford to move out from their parents' home and own or rent in the suburbs. I think of many residents who want to buy a new car but are scared that if they do, it will get stolen and the police won't follow up. Those everyday aspirations are not being met anymore, Madam Deputy Speaker. So it is my work in this place, it's our work on this side of the House to rebuild that deal, the deal of suburbia, and to make sure that those who put in so much can get out again. And let me just finish, Madam Deputy Speaker, by saying that to residents of Chipping Barnet, whether you live, here we go, in Brunswick Park, Whetstone, Totteridge, Mill Hill East, Arkley, Edgwarebury, Underhill, or one of the many Barnets, High Barnet, East Barnet, New Barnet, or Barnet Vale, it is the honour of my life to serve you and to represent you. I will do all I can for our communities during my time in this place.
Rebecca Paul to make a maiden speech.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to deliver my maiden speech in this important debate that seeks to remember the valiant actions of those who have fought to keep this country safe. It is a privilege to rise today as the newly elected Member of Parliament for Reigate, a constituency I am proud to represent and serve. I am deeply grateful to the people of Reigate, Redhill, Banstead and our villages for placing their trust in me. Before I turn to an issue of great importance to my constituents, I must acknowledge my predecessor, Crispin Blunt, himself a veteran. I have not rushed to deliver my maiden speech, not least out of a desire to give careful thought to the words I choose. Rather ironically, it seems Crispin faced a similar conundrum in 1997. In fact, I don't think I could do better than to quote from his own maiden speech, in which he said, and I quote, It must be admitted that Sir George Gardner did not end his Conservative Party career in a blaze of glory. He then goes on to say, Sir George was a resolute battler for the causes he believed in, and although many of us questioned his judgment at the end, no one could question the resolve with which he steered his chosen course. My sincere hope is that when my successor rises to deliver their maiden speech, they are not inclined to give those words a in this House. That said, I would like to recognise Crispin Blunt's 27 years of public service. I also want to pay tribute to his team. No MP achieves anything without a great team supporting them. And Crispin's team served our communities with diligence and grace during many challenging times. So I take this opportunity to thank them, especially Theresa Craig, who has gone above and beyond in the last 15 years, helping many thousands of constituents. I also want to pay tribute to Lord Grayling, the former MP for Epsom and Ewell. Thanks to recent boundary changes, I've welcomed the wards of Newark and Tattenham Corner and Preston into the Reigate constituency. Chris was an exceptional local MP, and I thank him for all his support. And now, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me turn to a subject close to my heart, my wonderful home. Reigate is a constituency that encapsulates the very best of both town and country. A trinity of towns in the most beautiful part of Surrey, each with their own unique character and identity. We have the historic town of Reigate, with its winding streets, independent shops and proud heritage, a place of immense charm and community spirit, and notably the location of the first road tunnel built in England. It is the birthplace of Margot Fontaine, one of the greatest classical ballerinas of all time, and also the place where both our current Prime Minister and Fatboy Slim were educated. Just north of the town stands Reigate Fort, a Victorian structure intended to serve as a last line of defence in the event that the South had fallen and defeat seemed certain. A role, Madam Deputy Speaker, not unlike that which Reigate played in the recent general election. Then there is Red Hill, a railway town that pulses with energy and ambition, a transport hub and a centre for business, commerce and the arts. The home to an inspirational lioness and some lobsters. As the place where the existence of solar flares was first confirmed, Red Hill shines bright as a vivacious younger sister to Reigate. And finally, we have Banstead, that offers a quieter appeal with its village feel and beautiful commons, its bustling high street adorned with gorgeous flowers lovingly tended by local residents, a community where its respectful patriotism is keenly felt, especially this time of year. I must take this opportunity to recognise and thank the Banstead and District Royal British Legion Branch, who do an outstanding job paying tribute to and raising money for our armed forces and veterans. Our towns, we are blessed with many picturesque villages, each with its own charm. Disappointingly, Madam Deputy Speaker, there isn't enough time for me to tell you about all of them, so I will tell you about just one, and that is Walton on the Hill. With its serene pond, world-class golf and history of feisty suffragettes, it is the place I chose to settle and raise my family. Like a thief, Walton stole my heart. I must thank the Prime Minister for giving it early release. Madam Deputy Speaker, it won't surprise you to hear that one of the reasons the towns and villages of my constituency are so unique is because of the Green Belt. We are incredibly fortunate to be surrounded by beautiful countryside, from the rolling hills of the North Downs to the open green spaces of Banstead Commons. But this country needs more homes, so the pressure now comes to build upon the Greenbelt, because it's easy, but that is the lazy solution. The new government talks about developing brownfield first, which I very much support, but just saying the words isn't enough. For building on these sites to become a reality, we need tangible action to make brownfield development economically viable. We also need to have an honest conversation about the impact of reducing housing targets in London, whilst nearly doubling them in Reigate and Banstead.
Quite right.
Even if by some miracle my local council could deliver this, they would simply be building homes for people from London to move into, not meeting the local need, and certainly not bringing down house prices. If we are to break the cycle, we must densify in cities where essential infrastructure is already in place. Indeed, I hope that this Labour government will consider tackling the issue of housing with the same spirit shown by the Labour government elected in the final months of the Second World War. Then as now, the country was in desperate need of more homes. Clement Attlee delivered 1 million of them, and he did so while insisting both on densification and ensuring that development was concentrated in cities and towns. Madam Deputy Speaker, Mr Attlee set out to build his new Jerusalem, primarily as a fitting tribute to a generation of servicemen who fought, endured and suffered to keep this country safe from fascist tyranny. That heroic generation included Flight Lieutenant Douglas Adcock from Red Hill, who flew ultra-high-risk missions for the Photographic Reconnaissance Squadron at RAF Benson. Tragically, though, Douglas never came home. On the 11th of August 1944, His aircraft failed to return from one of these missions, and some days later, his body washed up on the shore in Belgium, where he is buried today. A generation earlier, Lieutenant Rupert Hallows, another Red Hill man, answered the call to serve his country and would go on to earn the Victoria Cross in the First World War, but died fighting at Hughes in 1915. These are accounts of just 2 men, but memorials across my constituency bear the names of many hundreds more, hundreds who left home to fight for their country and did not return. Ultimately, the debt we owe to the fallen can never be repaid, but we honour them, keeping the promise to never forget. Yeah. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, on that note I will end, but just before I do, I want to thank my parents, Bev and Steve, without whom I wouldn't be here today. Today is a proud day for our family, one that we will remember. Thank you.
Yeah. Amanda Hack to make a maiden speech.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and congratulations to the member of Nuneaton, Chipping Barnet and Reigate for your excellent contributions so far. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the debate and Remembrance and Veterans. It was an honour to attend the Festival of Remembrance just over a week ago, organised by Leicester and Leicestershire British Legion at De Montfort Hall. It was an outstanding tribute to those who have served and those currently serving in the military. The festival paid thanks to our armed forces with some outstanding performances from local musicians and contemporary dancers. However, it will be the harrowing accounts of those experienced the D-Day landings that will stay with me. It will be a privilege to be involved in the many remembrance events across the constituency. It's the honour of my life to have been elected to serve as the MP for North West Leicestershire, and I'm following in the role from Andrew Bridgen, who served the community proudly for 14 years, and whilst we do not share much in terms of our politics, I know he worked hard for his constituents. Whilst I'm referring former MPs, I have to go back further to our former Labour MP, the late David Taylor, who sadly died in office in 2009. It will be no surprise for those who knew David that he's fondly remembered today in the constituency. North West Leicestershire is in the heart of the National Forest. It's a fast-growing area with the highest growing house growth in Leicestershire and an equally impressive growth in employment opportunities. None of this is surprising considering our transport links. We have an international airport in East Midlands Airport, which also includes one of the largest freight operations in the country. But like so many other areas that have seen massive growth, we've been lagging behind in terms of infrastructure. Local people need to see delivery of our commitment to expand public services rather than the scaling back we've seen under the last 14 years of the Conservatives. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm proud to be the first female MP in North West Leicestershire history. And I had the recent pleasure of attending an unveiling of a newly refurbished mother and child statue in Colville. Stuart Warburton, a local historian, has kindly checked for me, and we think she's the first lone female statue to be installed in the whole of Leicestershire. This award-winning statue, first installed in 1963, depicts a woman proudly striding forward with her son whilst holding a shopping bag, containing many items linked to the constituency. These items include a lump of coal, an oil tanker, a yarn bobbin, and a dolly. It occurred to me that there's no better means of showcasing our constituency by considering some of these items in her bag. North West Leicestershire has a rich mining heritage. The coal mining industry has been so important to the development of North West Leicestershire. It's literally the name of its main urban centre, Colville. The coalfields powered Britain. Kegworth, also in my constituency, is just a stone's throw away from the last coal-fired power station in the UK, which closed just a few weeks ago. As customary in a maiden speech, I will briefly adopt the role of a travel agent. I would highly recommend anyone to do a tour arranged by the Snibston Trust in Colville. Snibston has one of the last remaining examples of above-ground working of the coal mines. We also have many pit wheels dotted across the constituency, reminding of us of what previously lay beneath our feet. Whilst in Colville, you can pop into the Beaver Centre to sample the famous Bird's Bakery jam tart. My constituency is also home to another character that enjoys sweet things. Just a few miles up the road in the wonderful Ashby-de-la-Zouch, we have recently had installed a Paddington bear on a bench. For the thrill seekers, we have Donington Park, home to MotoGP and motorbike racing. And for the heavy metal fans and monsters, it's home to Download Festival every June. The oil tanker in the bag, like our coal heritage, Madam Deputy Speaker, North West Leicestershire's fingerprints are all over the rail industry. The oil tanker represents William Stableford's Wagon Works, which delivered a large contract for both English and foreign railways. It's perhaps ironic then that my constituency has no passenger rail service at all, even though the manufacturer Siemens completed the signalling work on the Elizabeth line from their base in the constituency. One of my major goals in this House is to get the Ivanhoe line back running for passengers. This train was originally created in the 1830s by the great industrialist and father of the railways, George Stephenson. Reopening it has the potential to create a beautiful train line to travel through the greenery of the National Forest. The National Forest line, now that sounds nice. In North West Leicestershire and other industries too, and it's no secret that Leicestershire has a long history with the British textile industry. The yarn bobbin, which is in the bag, and H-Seal elastics have been knitting in the constituency since 1898, and they currently provide textiles for use in military PPE, key equipment for our service personnel today. North West Leicestershire was also the home of Palitoy, that produced the dolly in the bag, but also the Action Man figurine, a character that seized the day and got stuff done. Indeed, the contents of your North West Leicestershire shopping bag today would be similar to your own shopping bags at home, now being home to a selection of food and drink manufacturers in the constituency. In it, you could find a selection of key produce from local farmers, KP Nuts, McVitie's Biscuits and Mars Bar, Jacob's Green Crackers, Quality Street, and some Mr. Freeze ice poles that I got to enjoy the Secretary of State for Business and Trade just a few months ago after a tour at the Refresco's beverage factory. However, during my time here in this House, I hope to be an action woman, someone that adds to our North West Leicestershire bag, with cleaner waterways, better public services for all, and most importantly, Madam Deputy Speaker, an anytime day return ticket on the Ivanhoe line. Thank you.
I call Ben Obese-Jecty.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In Huntingdon, 1 in 9 households has a veteran within it. An astonishing figure, and one that illustrates the historical link between our armed forces and the constituency which today still has RAF Whitton and also 2 United States Air Force bases, RAF Falconbury and RAF Molesworth. Legacy bases that can trace their history back to the Second World War. I'm hugely proud to be able to represent such a vibrant veterans community. My own service was as an infantry officer in the Royal Yorkshire Regiment. I served in the British Army during the most kinetic period of operations since the Korean War. Operation Herrick 11 in Afghanistan was a difficult tour. In Sangin, our battle group lost 30 soldiers. A further 170 were wounded. I remember being in the operations room when 2 new battle casualty replacements arrived on a resupply helicopter. I didn't stop to have a brew or help them settle in. My interaction with them both was fleeting, transactional. It was an everyday occurrence and I thought little more about it. A fortnight later, on Tuesday, December 15th, 2009, I was manning the operations room, and over the radio came an all too familiar message. Contact IED, wait out. There follows a pause, which lasts an eternity. You know somebody is now fighting for their life. You know somebody might possibly already be dead. You know you can do little else than stand up the quick reaction force and wait to find out just how grave the situation is. A suicide bomber had ridden his motorbike into the checkpoint and detonated it, killing the 2 Afghan soldiers manning it instantly and fatally wounding 2 of our soldiers who were providing cover. I pressed our commander on the ground for an update, and to my eternal regret, I was quite short with him and continued to harry him for a sit rep. I didn't know at the time that he was trying to give life-saving first aid to one of the soldiers whilst under fire. The medic that day had tried valiantly to save both soldiers. Ignoring the bullets cutting the air around her, she calmly moved between each casualty, determined to do all she could to care for them. The weight of enemy fire increased. With flagrant disregard for her own safety, Bushby nevertheless continued to move between the casualties, personally administering CPR to one of the soldiers. For her actions, Lance Corporal Sarah Bushby was awarded the Military Cross. Yeah. Rifleman James Brown was 18 years old. He had arrived on that helicopter. He'd been sanguine for less than 2 weeks. Age shall not weary him, nor the years condemn. I've always promised to remember him and to give him an opportunity to live on in a way he will never sadly get. We have a duty in this house to consider the ramifications of committing our soldiers to operations. I don't recount this story to dissuade, but to put a human face on the price it costs. They were the best of us, and the very least we can do is to remember them.
Tom Rutland to make his maiden speech.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for allowing me to make my maiden speech in this debate, and may I congratulate my colleagues on some brilliant maiden speeches today. It's often said it's a privilege to be in this place, and it's one that we owe to the bravery of those who fought for our country and for freedom in the 2 world wars. In my constituency of East Worthing and Shoreham, British troops rallied in advance of D-Day on Broadwater Green and embarked from Shoreham port to land in Normandy, paving the way for the Allied victory over the Nazis. And with freedom in Europe again under threat, I am sure it is not just my shoulders that feel the weight of responsibility in rising to meet this moment and honour those brave sacrifices that transcend our time in this place. Like so many other new members nervously preparing their first contribution to this awe-inspiring place, I had a good flick through my predecessors' own initial contributions and enjoyed seeing how some things had remained the same and others had changed. Still nestled between the South Downs and the sea, still the most beautiful constituency in the country. And indeed, still the same constituency name, much to the disappointment of my neighbours in Lancing, who feel the name does not properly recognise the largest village in the country. But much has changed, and my sitting here as the first Labour Member of Parliament for East Worthing and Shoreham is perhaps one clear indicator of that. In 1997, my immediate predecessor spoke of how Worthing had the oldest population in the country. Today, it's very different, with many young people coming to start a family in our vibrant coastal community. But whilst the political sea change in the splendid seaside settlements I represent has been stark, my constituents do not have to get used to a wildly different name for their MP, from Tim to Tom. And I hope my predecessor, Tim Lawton, knows the regard in which many residents hold him after his 27 years of public service. But I also hope that, in time, fewer residents call me Tim, though judging from 32 years of my parents' friends' Christmas cards making the same mistake, that is perhaps wishful thinking. And speaking of family, I would briefly like to thank my own for their love and support on my journey here, particularly my mum and dad, because I think everyone in this place has that moment where they switched onto politics and realised the difference that it could make. For me, it was realising as a teenager that I was gay and feeling like I wouldn't achieve everything I could or I should because of who I was. And it was the worst feeling in the world. I've never forgotten it. Life is thankfully very different now, in no small part thanks to the transformative work of the last Labour government and brave, trailblazing MPs. And I'm very lucky to be able to thank my partner, my boyfriend, Jack, for his support. Words that I never thought I would have the courage to say when I was growing up, but can say with great pride today. But that feeling I had is why I care about politics, because I don't want any child to feel that way, whether it's because of the colour of their skin, their religion, whether they're a boy or a girl, have a disability, who they love, or how much their parents earn. And that drive is what has led me to spend my career campaigning, from standing up for consumers to fighting for working people as a trade union official. So it's an honour to serve as part of this new Labour government, because there is so much that needs fixing. My constituents know all too well the struggles to get an appointment with their GP, to find a school place for their child, to swim in the sea without sewage, to afford a safe and secure home of their own, and to get a good job that doesn't just pay the bills, but allows them to thrive. Fixing the foundations of this country will take time, but I've got no doubt that the mission of this government, driven by the aspirations and determination of my constituents, will succeed. For there is so much to be proud of locally. We don't sit in the shadow of Brighton and Hove next door. Shoreham Port, not just a thriving commercial hub for cargo, leisure boats and fishing trawlers, but an eco-port generating renewable energy and enhancing marine biodiversity. Further inland, Ricardo built on more than a century of engineering excellence and innovation, and having been home to great penicillin fermentation tanks in the 60s, Worthing today remains a life sciences hub, with GSK continuing to manufacture life-saving antibiotics locally. Or take Flair, who've evolved from building world-leading loudspeakers in Lancing Business Park to shipping earphones and products that defend against irritating noises. And I dare say that my honourable colleagues might find them useful in this chamber from time to time. And thanks to Fitz in Worthing, we're able to toast these successes with local fizz. And we have the most incredible community organisations, led by ordinary people giving up extraordinary amounts of their time for the betterment of others. Whether it's Wendy organising litter picks and beach cleans to keep Lancing lovely, Di providing food to those in need through the Shoreham and Ada Community Food Bank, or David, Sarah and Simon running 20 youth football teams at Southwick Rangers FC, ours is a community where we look after each other and love where we live. And when I think about the good hearts of those in my constituency who inspire me, I hope that as we bring about the change people voted for at the election, we can do so in a way that is a little more gentle. Because politicians are humans too, with all the strengths and flaws of those who send us here. And that's why it can be a dangerous thing to have political idols. Nobody's perfect. But many years ago, I had the pleasure of working for, and more importantly, learning from two giants, Lord Adonis and the late, great Tessa Jowell. And if I can summon half of Andrew's intellect and just an ounce of the extraordinary compassion that Tessa exuded, then I hope I will do them and my constituents proud. And whilst we all have our own story, whilst we've all walked our own path that has brought us here today, I think my ultimate aim for my time here is the same as everyone else's, to leave things better than we found them. I know from personal experience that politics can improve people's lives, and it must. So thank you to the people of East Worthing and Shoreham for sending me here, and know that the true thanks comes not in the words said in this speech today, but in the hard work that I will put in for so long as you see fit to send me here and give me the great privilege of serving you as your Member of Parliament.
I call Lisa Smart.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a real honour to follow 5 cracking maiden speeches from the new members from Nuneaton, Chipping Barnet, Reigate, North West Leicestershire, East Worthing and Shoreham. You all did your constituents proud. Yeah. And for so many of us in this chamber, this debate today is personal. I think we're lucky to hear from several members about their own service. My own connection to our armed forces is a family one, with both my granddad and my uncle having served in the King Shropshire Light Infantry, and their shared experiences remind me that behind every veteran is a story of sacrifice, resilience and courage, and as well as a family and friends who support them and miss them while they're away. The loved ones of servicemen and women often bear the weight of anxiety and uncertainty, worrying for their safety and well-being, and it is crucial that we honour their contributions, for they too endure hardships that are often overlooked. And I also want to spend a moment thinking of those whose names may not always be etched into the stone on our war memorials, but whose legacies still deserve to be remembered. And one such figure is Romilly's own Gertrude Powick. During the First World War, she dedicated herself to the war effort by volunteering with the Friends War Victims Relief Committee, working as a nurse on the front lines in both France and Poland. And having travelled to Warsaw to treat a typhus outbreak, she contracted typhus herself and died in 1919. Gertrude was not just a caregiver and a suffragist, she was also a trailblazer for women during wartime and is the only woman to be named on a war memorial in Stockport via a plaque on the Heaton Moor Memorial. And her work reminds us that heroism comes in many forms, and it's our duty to remember those like her who played a pivotal role in shaping our country's history. In my constituency of Hazel Grove, our community is taking many proactive steps to address the challenges faced by veterans. Nearly 3,000 veterans are estimated to be homeless in the UK at any given time. And a report from the Royal British Legion indicates that 42% of veterans are experiencing issues with their mental health, with depression, anxiety or PTSD. We've got brilliant groups in Hazel Grove like the Armed Forces and Veterans Breakfast Club, obviously the Hazel Grove branch of the Royal British Legion, and Project Recce, who train veterans in construction skills. We're also looking to turn Woodbank Hall, a 200-year-old building, in Woodbank Memorial Park that's fallen into disrepair into a veterans centre, and I would welcome any and all support from ministers on the front bench today. As we remember those who have served during this debate, let us commit ourselves not only to offer their past sacrifices, but also to actively improve their present circumstances, because a brighter future for our veterans and their families is possible, one that ensures they receive the respect, care and support they so richly deserve.
I call Leigh Ingram to make her maiden speech.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to those honourable members who have made their maiden speeches today. The honourable members for Nuneaton, this is a test, Chipping Barnet, Reigate, North West Leicestershire and East Worthing and Shoreham. As ever, I've heard moving stories, not only about your constituencies, but about your own lives. It's an honour to speak in this debate today, with family who have served or are serving in the Merchant Navy, the Army and the RAF. I am thankful for the incredible sacrifice members of the armed forces and their families make for this country. My constituency has strong armed forces connections, including the accommodation at MOD Stafford, known as Beacon Barracks, the training camp at Swinnerton, and a veteran community of more than 4,300. I will fully support them and their families to fight to ensure they have access to quality accommodation and local services. Madam Deputy Speaker, I grew up in a working class household, the daughter of a factory worker and a bricklayer, who I'm so pleased to have here today. I never imagined I would be stood here today making my maiden speech as an MP. Being honest, Westminster can be a little intimidating, so I'd like to give particular thanks to the wonderful House of Commons doorkeepers and Speaker's team for making me feel so welcome, particularly Jamie, Joe, Leigh and Andy. I don't know if I'm allowed to say their names.
Done it anyway.
I also want to pay tribute to my predecessors, Theo Clark and Sybil Cash. Theo, the former MP for Stafford, campaigned passionately on women's health, a cause I will continue to champion. Sybil Cash was the previous MP for Stone and a 40-year political veteran, having won 10 general elections. I can't promise to share his politics, but I do promise to serve my constituents with as much vigour as he did. I also would like to thank Jeremy Lefroy and David Kidney, both still regarded as brilliant constituency MPs. For constituents to praise a Conservative and a Labour MP in the same breath shows how important it is constituents feel seen, heard and represented in this place by the person, not just the party. The people of Stafford, Eccleshall and the villagers want a visible MP who listens, who fights for them and who prioritises their collective interests over personal agendas. A politics that prioritises we, not me. This is the kind of politics that I wholeheartedly support. And for those unfamiliar, my constituency is both urban and rural, featuring over 50 towns and villages, which I will not be listing today. I have only
3 minutes left. We want to hear.
With Stafford as the proud and largest county town. Stafford Town Centre is quintessentially British, featuring, and this is just to name a few, the ancient High House, Victoria Park, the famous soup kitchen, which you should all visit, the beautiful churches of St Chad's and St Mary's, and of course the Gatehouse Theatre, known for its Shakespeare Festival.
That's it.
The historic castle also, just outside of town, is a key feature of Stafford. We're also fortunate to have an outstanding rated college in Stafford, shared with my Right Honourable Member for Newcastle, soon to be opening a state-of-the-art Institute of Technology. Eccleshall, another lovely town in my constituency, boasts a brilliant high street with 7 pubs, and also it's got its own castle, bringing the constituency total to 2. The 2024 boundary changes added rural areas, including Loggerheads, Mare and Whitmore, Nosal to the Stafford constituency, enhancing our farming areas, introducing new residents and lovely village pubs. Supporting our rural communities will be a key focus for me in the coming years. One thing that always strikes me about my constituency is the caring nature and the strength of our community. Local libraries, charities and faith groups have stepped up during the last 14 years of Conservative austerity. A standout example is William Morris and his House of Bread, a brilliant charity which provides meals and support to those in need. One of my favourite stories William tells me is in the week he earned the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service, he also was given an ASBO for the same work.
Tory Council.
It's a rare combination, but it is one which demonstrates how far the people of Stafford will go to stand up for and support each other. The change of government means there is so much to celebrate. This cohort has a record proportion of state-educated and women MPs. Our Cabinet breaks records on the number of state-educated ministers and secretaries, and we have our first female Chancellor. While there is still work to be done on social mobility and equality, we are moving in the right direction. 30 years ago, when I was growing up, I wouldn't have thought someone like me could be in a place like this. So over the next 5 years, I'll continue to work closely with the people of Stafford, Eccleshall and the villagers to address their issues, get our public services working again, and to celebrate the positivity and joy that's in our area. Finally, I hope that the next bricklayer's daughter in Highfields or the factory worker's son in Docksey knows that when they grow up, they are just as entitled to end up in the House of Commons as anyone else.
Lincoln Job.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I start by joining others in wishing the Royal Marines a very happy 360th birthday today. They are a superb unit with a proud and distinguished history, albeit slightly shorter than my own regiment's. They call us Pongos and we call them bootnecks, and it's an honour to share this house with so many distinguished Royal Marines. My honourable and gallant friend, the member for Exmouth and Exeter East, and the honourable and gallant member for Birmingham Selly among their number. When I was 14, my English master, Mr. Smale, gave us a poem to read, and it annoyed me very much. It was written by Philip Larkin, and it ends like this. Crowds colourless and careworn had made my taxi late, yet not till I was airborne did I recall the date. The day when Queen and Minister and band of guards and all still act their solemn sinister wreath rubbish in Whitehall. It makes me want to throw up these mawkish nursery games. Oh, when will England grow up? But I outsaw the Thames and dwindled off down Oster to greet Professor Lau. He once met Morgan Foster, my contact and my pal. I think what got to me then was the soaring, sneering cynicism of the persona that the poet had created, of the travelling academic looking down, both metaphorically and literally, on the cenotaph service here in Westminster. I think it offended my sense of fairness. Soldiers, by and large, have little choice in what they're called to do. Equally, they have little choice in the way in which the nation subsequently remembers them. They just do what they are called to do.
Will my honourable gallant friend give way?
I will give way.
I'd thank my honourable gallant friend for giving way. This year marks 80 years since D-Day, and one of my constituents, Don Shepherd, died aged 104 earlier this year, a veteran of both D-Day and of Arnhem. And I like the point my honourable friend is making. Don's quote was, the lads that didn't make it back, those are the ones we need to remember. Would my honourable and gallant friend agree with me on that point?
My honourable friend makes a powerful point and places on the record a number of distinguished veterans and their contribution to national life, and I thank him for it. If I may, as a former soldier who has lost men, let me get one thing straight. These men and women died for us all to be free, free to do whatever the laws of the land permit us to do. Wear a poppy, don't wear a poppy. Remember, don't remember. It's your freedom, it's your choice. Because on days like Remembrance Sunday, there isn't a soldier, sailor, airman or Royal Marine for whom that question couldn't matter less. They are in another place. They are seeing the faces of lost friends. They are feeling guilty for having survived when their friends have not. They are trying to hold it together long enough for the opening time to come at the pub. But if I may, on their behalf, thank you. Thank you for being here in this debate today and at the constituency gardens of Remembrance earlier. Thank you for the respect. Thank you for your thank you. The act of remembrance is a little like going to church. Some people go to church once a year, some once a week. For remembrance, it could be 2 minutes silence once a year for some, just finding 2 minutes peace in a day from the awfulness of the loss of a son or daughter for another. Regardless, here today, we will remember them and we will honour our fallen.
Yeah. Louise Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am a veteran, and Madam Deputy Speaker, it is great to be a veteran. I learned so much from my service in the military. I had so many great experiences. I was proud to play my own small part in Afghanistan, and as well as that, I also worked with some fantastic people. It is great to be a veteran. Serving isn't all sunshine and roses, but I can recommend no better career for someone in their 20s than to join our military. But with the joy of service can come sadness. My own constituency of North East Derbyshire has many diverse towns and villages, whether the ex-pit town of Clay Cross, Dronfield with its bustling heart, or Killamarsh with its proud Derbyshire spirit. But they all have one thing in common. At the heart of each of them is a war memorial with the names of those that were lost in conflicts up to and including over 100 years ago. These names were all once living, breathing members of their community, much loved brothers, sons, fathers, friends, and other relatives. And it's them I think of when I wear the poppy. There can be a lot of very clever discourse about the poppy for what is such a simple and humble flower. The fact is, the poppy is a truly successful grassroots movement. The first poppy appeal, in fact, saw over 9 million sold in its first year, all worn by ordinary men and women who came together because they had lost a loved one and wanted to remember them. Grainy black and white photos from the 1920s show these people standing in remembrance ceremonies in the cold and silent November air, their grief clear to see on their faces even in those more stoic times. The poppy truly spontaneously united millions in hope. Some people may not bear to see that unity, but it is something which still unites millions today. Yeah. I would like to just briefly address some earlier points that were raised. It is very, very important that we do learn the lessons of the past 14 years, that we understand who had made the decisions regarding our armed forces and why those decisions were made. Who sold off our valuable military housing stock to Addington so cheaply? I believe it was the Conservatives. Pulling our forces out of very important bases in Germany, even as Russia became active in Ukraine. I believe again it was the Conservatives. Who wasted billions on procurement? Who reduced the offer to serving personnel, leading to a hemorrhage of numbers serving in our military? The Conservatives. Who saw the reduction of our military size to mean we can barely field a brigade minus? It is the Conservatives. So yes, let's have accountability, but it starts with an iota of shame from the party opposite before they are allowed anywhere near our defence again. Yeah. At least, however, they are here, which I know not every party has a representative here. I would also like to add briefly, in response, that one tenet very close to my heart as a veteran is that the rule of law is of the highest importance, and no more so.
I call Liz Saville-Roberts.
And in the time that I have, I'd like to raise a couple of matters particularly relevant to Wales, and also to say what a delight it is to hear all the maiden speeches this evening. Yeah. Now, the post of Veterans Commission for Wales was established 2 years ago. It's held by the Colonel James Phillips, but his appointment is due to come to an end on the 31st of December. Could the Minister, in his closing statements, please update the House about approval to extend this role? Colonel Phillips' second annual report was published last month. It makes clear why a commissioner is crucial for veterans in Wales, so they aren't failed by the jagged edge of devolved and reserved powers. Core state funding from both Welsh Government and the UK Government is necessary to make sure veterans receive proper care in terms of health and housing, devolved, as well as reserved matters such as welfare and justice. 50% of the veteran population in Wales are over 65 years old. 20% are over 85 years old. Alongside health, the cost of living is a significant challenge for older veterans. And of course, military compensation shouldn't be treated as income for the purpose of benefits and pensions. And an income disregard should be introduced for the War Pensions and Armed Forces Compensation Scheme. And it's not just the veterans themselves, of course, but the third sector providers on which veteran support relies so heavily in Wales. These providers have seen a steep increase in operational costs and reduced funding. Organisations like Woodie's Lodge and VC Gallery are particularly hard hit. And this is important. While initiatives like Operation Courage, Restore and Nova have received new money in England, in Wales they don't exist, and neither have we seen equivalent funding, leaving many critical services funded hand to mouth from year to year through grants. But this evening I'm also proud to support a campaign for an official memorial to remember and honour the pilots and navigators of the RAF's Photographic Reconnaissance Unit, being organised as we speak by the Spitfire AAA 810 project. The PRU flew highly dangerous clandestine missions to take intelligence photos. Their stripped-down planes were unarmed to carry as much fuel as possible. For this reason, they included conscientious objectors among their crews. The death rate was horrific, with around 48% losing their lives. One PRU survivor was Edward Bacon of Ewell in Healey near Carnarvon in my constituency. The project is keen to reach out to families to collect their stories so that their loved ones will once again be more than just another name carved on a war memorial. And talking of memorials, the project is also campaigning for a UK memorial here in Westminster. When this comes to fruition, and it will, wreckage from a PRU aircraft will be its centrepiece. This poignant reminder of courage and horrendous risks faced by PRU airmen was retrieved just last month, from a Mosquito aircraft which crashed in Arran-Valdwy in Meirionydd 80 years ago.
Order. Sarah Hall. Sarah.
Deputy Speaker. As a nation, we are rightly proud of our armed forces, personnel and veterans, and theirs is the ultimate public service, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. Now, all here today, as we've heard already, have been touched by stories of heroism and heartbreaking sacrifice in defence of our nation. And I would like to take this opportunity to honour those who have served and those who have made the ultimate sacrifice to defend our freedoms and protect our way of life. And today I want to focus on 3 brave soldiers from Warrington who lost their lives. Marine Stephen Birdsall of 40 Commando Royal Marines, who died in 2010. Private Thomas Sefton of 1st Battalion, the Mercian Regiment, who died in 2010. And Private Daniel Wade from 3rd Battalion, the Yorkshire Regiment, who died in 2012. We will never forget the sacrifices they made. We are all here today because we owe so much to those who came before. We're deeply proud of our veterans, serving personnel and the families who support them for the contribution they make to our country. I'd also like to pay tribute to the mother of Private Daniel Wade, Lisa Billing. In memory of her son, Lisa worked tirelessly alongside Warrington Borough Council and others to revitalise Marshall Gardens in Warrington Town Centre. Marshall Gardens, which sits opposite the town cenotaph on Bridgefoot, has been transformed into a haven of peace, reflection and remembrance. And Lisa was instrumental in making this happen, pouring her heart and soul into this project. In Warrington, the scale of support for our serving personnel, veterans and families is clear to see with the popularity of the annual Warrington Armed Forces Day Festival, held each year at Crossfields Rugby League Club to raise money for armed forces charities in memory of Tom Sefton. And it's here that the community has taken the opportunity to come together to enjoy a day of rugby league entertainment with thousands of people showing their continuing and unwavering support to all our armed forces, raising tens of thousands of pounds for armed forces, rugby league and local charities. I also want to pay tribute to Warrington's Veteran Hub. While based in my honourable friend, the Honourable Member for Warrington North constituency, support offered by the Hub reaches far and wide. And I think it's fair to say that while we are 2 constituencies, we are also one town. One town with a shared sense of pride, respect and admiration for all serving and veteran military personnel, and a shared drive and passion to ensure they receive the help and support that they need. Now, while over the years we've heard many, many warm words about the contribution of our armed forces, too often that this hasn't translated into action. However, I am proud that this Labour government has committed to act.
Order. Jim Allister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I join in the tributes to our gallant security forces who, through their sacrifice, has brought us all the liberty that we enjoy. And when, of course, our soldiers fall in foreign fields, we feel it very deeply. When they fall on home ground, there's an added poignancy to it. And as a member for Northern Ireland, representing the constituency of Northampton, I want tonight to place on record the appreciation of so many of the people of Northern Ireland for the willing sacrifice of our gallant security forces from across this United Kingdom, who paid with their lives in defending Northern Ireland from the ravages of terrorism. That is a debt that is much appreciated by many of us. When I think of that, and I think of our affirmation that we will remember them, I wanted to just take an illustration. Today is the 28th of October. Let me share with this House the number and names of the soldiers who died on various 28ths of October on home soil in the United Kingdom. 20th of October 1972, Lance Sergeant Thomas Mackay from Edinburgh, married man with 2 children, shot from behind in Londonderry. 20th of October 1973, Private Stephen Hall, 1st Light Infantry from Bristol, shot in Closmaglen. 1974, Private Michael Swanwick and Private Alan Coughlin, both murdered by a bomb attack on the Sands home where they stayed at the Ballykinler camp. 20th of October 1976, off-duty UDR soldier, reminding us that so many local soldiers also paid the price. Stanley Desmond Adams, a postman, shot doing his rounds. 1979, 20th of October, Warrant Officer David Bellamy, shot in a Land Rover as he left the police station. Those are reminders of names we've all forgotten, but names of those to which we in Northern Ireland and elsewhere owe so much. And I want to place on record our appreciation tonight. I want to say one final thing to the government. We have a Veterinaries Commissioner in Northern Ireland, but it has never been put on a statutory basis. That needs to be done to give it lasting effect.
Order. Mark Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Leeds South Western Morley has a proud tradition of standing side by side with veterans in our community and remembering those who made the ultimate sacrifice. In Morley, our serving Mayor, Simon Brown, served with the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. In 2006, Simon was shot by a sniper in Iraq while on a rescue mission to help a stranded vehicle's 6-person crew. He lost one eye completely and he only has partial sight in the other, and this has never held him back from serving the veterans in our community in Morley, and we are very proud to have him as our mayor. Yeah. His deputy mayor, Carol Edwards, is also a veteran. Now, Carol supports the organisation Veterans in Need Together, or VINT for short. Now, VINT aims to help veterans regain their sense of pride following their service. The lead facilitator, Addie Heptonstall, provides a space at Morley Fire Station every Wednesday at 7 p.m. for veterans to come together to talk and to share. I also want to pay tribute to Christine Hurst, who runs the Soldiers, Sailors and Airmen's Families Association, that's SAFA, Luncheon Club in Morley on the first Sunday of every month. The meals are excellent, as is the entertainment. Now, like every corner of the UK, we have also lost service people in the line of duty. I want to pay tribute to Morley's Lance Corporal David Kirkness, who lost his life in 2009 to a suicide bomber in Afghanistan, along with Rifleman James Brown. Senior officers in the military at the time said that they gave their lives to prevent a larger tragedy in a nearby marketplace where casualties would have been much higher. We thank David for his service. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is so important that we remember the sacrifice our veterans have made for us. Every year, the Royal British Legion branches in Morley and East and West Ardsley do their part for the Poppy Appeal, and I do want to place on record my thanks to Gail Wood, our honorary Poppy Appeal organiser in Morley, and Paul Wood, her deputy, for their tireless efforts, along with every volunteer who supports the Royal British Legion. Every part of my constituency will pay tribute on Remembrance Sunday. The people of Morley will show up in huge numbers, as we always do at the service in Scatcherd Park. Terry Gratian, the chairman of the Morley Remembrance Committee, does an outstanding job of helping to organise this. Reverend Chris Balding will lead services at Wortley and at Farnley Cenotaph. There will be services in Driglington, in Gildersham, in Cherwell, in every part of my constituency. And in Tingley there will be a service near the site where an RAF bomber crashed in 1944, where we will honour the 7 servicemen who tragically lost their lives as a result. Every corner of Leeds South West and Morley takes pride in paying their respects to those that have served. Our veterans have done their part for our country, and we should never stop trying to do our part for them.
Mike Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As we approach Remembrance, we often think of one person. Perhaps they're a friend who's died in conflict, or if we've served, they're a comrade, or perhaps they're a great-grandparent that we never met, but their memory looms large in our family lore. Madam Deputy Speaker, we often remember one person. And this year, as we remember, I'm going to be thinking of Luke Took, a Royal Artilleryman from the 16th Regiment Royal Artillery. Now, Luke was the last Tunbridge-Wellian to die in conflict, and he died in 2018 in Kabul, Afghanistan. And he died when a suicide bomber in a truck packed full of explosives rams the gates, and then in a secondary attack, a bunch of insurgents stormed the compound, and he died in the resulting firefight. Now, I never knew Luke, but I had the honour of marching alongside his dad, Anthony, in the Remembrance Parade in Tunbridge Wells. And after we'd marched, Auntie and I spoke about Luke and about Jacqueline, who was Luke's mum. And I was struck by the quiet dignity and pride that they showed in their son in the face of what must be heart-searing pain. And we've heard it said today, every day, if they can find 2 minutes to escape that heart-searing pain, it must be a blessed release. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm often asked whether deaths in conflict are worth it, specifically whether British deaths in conflict are worth it. And as a veteran myself of Afghanistan, I often think about this. There are 2 answers, Madam Deputy Speaker. One is the personal. Each death is a tragedy, and like Luke died defending his comrades and his mates, and it's a tragedy, but it has meaning because he died in service to his comrades and his friends. But to answer the second question, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have to look to ourselves, the members of this House, for it is us who send them there, and we send them there for our country. And so the greatest honour that we can pay to our veterans is to consider incredibly carefully the questions that come before us, because we will have to make decisions about peace and war in this Parliament. We will remember Luke.
Alan Gemmell.
Thank you,
Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to join the House in thanking our armed forces, including those people from Central Ayrshire who have served our country, who continue to put their lives on the line in the defence of our country, and for those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. I also want to thank the Royal British Legion Irvine and Troon branches, as well as the Ayr and Prestwick branch of the Royal Air Forces Association and the Prestwick Community Council for the remembrance services they help arrange in the towns of Irvine, Prestwick and Troon, and their important work year-round to support veterans and their families. I'd also like to thank Veterans First Point in Irvine, staffed by veterans and a one-stop shop for veterans and their families. I hope the House might also extend its congratulations to the Ayr and Prestwick branch of the Royal Air Forces Association, which received the President's Cup at this year's National Conference, recognised as the top branch in the RAFA for their excellent work with veterans, service personnel in the community, as well as facilitating remembrance services for Polish colleagues at the Polish War Memorial. And they happen to have the oldest veteran in the constituency, Flight Lieutenant retired Harry Richardson, DFC, a 106-year-old hero World War II pilot. Finally, I would also like to recognise the work of those colleagues who help us remember around the world, particularly the Commonwealth War Graves staff and the colleagues I used to work with in embassies and in the British Council who have worked with me on remembrance events. Particularly my former colleague Dr. Debanjan Chakrabarti, who visited a number of Commonwealth war graves in the northeast of India with me, including the cemetery in Kohima. And as those of us who attended Mr. Speaker's remembrance event this morning will know, this year marks the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Kohima. The battle in April 1944 was a turning point in the war in Asia, and many believe that the assistance the Naga people gave the British and Indian troops as guides, porters and combatants was critical in our success in that campaign. I well remember being welcomed to Kohima by the Naga people, visiting the Kohima cemetery high in the Naga hills and walking along row upon row of British and Indian graves. And reading there the Kohima epitaph, "When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow we gave our today."
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and it is a pleasure to speak in this debate. Timely debate because we are approaching Remembrance Day, but it's always because it's time to remember with gratitude those who have laid down their lives to protect the things that we hold dear, democracy and the right to live in our lives and raise our children. When I think of remembrance, I think of Winston Donald, murdered on the 9th of August 1971. No one ever made accountable for his murder. The IRA murdered him, and I always remember that. Today, in the Remembrance Garden, I took the opportunity to remember some 4 UDR men murdered at Ballydugan on the 9th of April in 1990. Lance Corporal Badley, John Birch, who I grew up in Ballywalter with, and Michael Adams and Stephen Smart. I also took the opportunity in the cross that I left in the Remembrance Garden today to remember my cousin Kenneth Smith, murdered by the IRA on the 10th of December 1971. Again, no one ever made accountable. So you can understand, Madam Deputy Speaker, why I seek justice for all those people who were murdered, and no one ever made accountable. So I also declare an interest as a member of the Ulster Defence Regiment. I served in it for 3 years, and also in the Royal Artillery for 11.5 years as a part-time soldier. As a former member of the Ulster Defence Regiment, I am proud of that institution that I serve with. I'm also thankful for the service of the RUC, for those men and women who served with their communities knowing that they were a target. I'm thankful for the spouses and the children who could go for days without seeing or hearing from their loved ones as they went into dangerous situations and tried to uphold law and justice against those who terrorised them, who threatened their families and their very lives. I'm thankful for the sacrifice of family time, of peace at homes. I remember their sacrifice and the toll that their service had on their mental health, a price that too many honourable RUC officers still pay to this day, whilst also having that service distorted and torn apart to pacify a Republican rewrite of history, to make a force synonymous with justice, with duty, with diligence, to be smeared with accusations of dishonour. I will not allow that in this House to happen, Madam Deputy Speaker. And remember, the RUC served with great honour, which they earned through blood, sweat and continued tears. Today I unapologetically stand on my feet to thank those who served in the Ulster Defence Regiment, those with the green berries, I've still got mine, and the green finches, the bravest of women. I stand on my feet to refute those accusations that would make the service of this force anything other than admirable. I thank those green finch women. Women who worked all night to keep their children safe, came home and sent their children to school and lived a dual life for fear that their children would be put at risk if they were known that they were part of the British state. For all of us who lived through the terrorism by evil people in both communities, have much to be thankful for to those who served, and so to those veterans of the RUC, the British Army and the Ulster Defence Regiment, and their families who paid the price of service, I say a big thank you. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them all. Thank you.
Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Remembrance in Portsmouth isn't just one day a year, it's all round. The Royal Navy and those who serve runs through our city's DNA. I, like so many in Portsmouth, am a very proud cousin, great-niece, granddaughter and now mum of service personnel. Since my election in July and before, it's been a pleasure to meet so many veterans, service personnel and those who support our troops at home and at sea, and witness this year-round remembrance firsthand. Recently, I attended the 100 Years of the Commonwealth Memorial on Southsea Common, and I met constituent Clive, a standard bearer and Royal Navy veteran who, along with others, come rain or shine, is at every remembrance event in Portsmouth. I had the privilege of spending the night on His Majesty's Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier to see her in operation and listen to current service personnel. It's been brilliant to join the Armed Forces and Veterans Club for a cracking fry-up at one of their regular breakfast catch-ups, and to meet with MOD Housing to assess the situation facing our current service personnel. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, it was an honour to host the Royal Navy Association veterans in Parliament a few weeks ago to talk about life post-service, and an honour for my city to host D-Day 80. Being in the armed forces is like being in a large family, so it was great to visit the Whale Island Nursery to see the work they are doing in keeping families together, even when in reality they are often miles apart. I'm proud to be taking part in the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme. I'm also proud to be part of a government that recognises service of all our veterans and the importance of quality housing and the need for more and better post services, and whom respects the contributions of our veterans in our country. We have listened as a government and acted on policies that veteran charities have been calling for years, whether that be approving veteran cards as voter ID, committing to enacting the Armed Forces Covenant Law, or recognising the priority of housing. I look forward to selling poppies again this year with Terry and Denise and the army of volunteers that are in my city. And ahead of all of the commemorations this weekend, and ahead of the official remembrance in Portsmouth Guildhall on Remembrance Sunday, I want to put on record my deepest gratitude to those who keep us safe every day, those who have lost their lives defending our country, and particularly those lost at sea. And as the last post rings out and across our country, I ask that we hold proudly those who have served and who are serving and their families close in our hearts.
Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My Mid-Sussex constituent and resident of Burgess Hill, able seaman George Chandler, was due to lead the blind veterans at the Remembrance Parade on Remembrance Sunday, coming up the weekend after this one coming. Sadly, George died earlier this month. He was 99 years old. I never had the privilege of meeting George, but I have been able to speak to his son Paul, who gave me a wonderful insight into his father, who was full of character and Paul described as an old rogue. George was born to a working-class family off the Old Kent Road, and when war was declared, aged 14, George stayed in London. He wasn't evacuated, and experienced the Blitz in all its horror. His father, Will, had been a soldier on the Somme, and George was determined that he wouldn't be what he called one of the poor bloody infantry. He wasn't going to go into the army. So when he was still 17, he pestered the recruiters at the Naval Office to sign him up, and eventually they took him on, even though he hadn't yet reached his 18th birthday. George saw active service in the Channel as a gunner on a dog boat, with close combat with the Germans very frequently occurring. And on D-Day, he provided cover for American troops landing on Omaha Beach. Watching it, for him, was just slaughter before his eyes. He returned from the D-Day landings to Newhaven in East Sussex, and he saw rows and rows of empty coffins waiting for the dead. This year, George was one of a handful of the remaining veterans who took part in the 80th anniversary commemorations. He went to number 10 Downing Street and HMS Belfast and Trooping of the Colour. And this caused George's family a certain amount of consternation, for you see, George was not a Conservative. His family were terribly worried about what George might say when he met some government ministers. They had a plan that if George let rip, they may just get his wheelchair and whisk him away before any embarrassment could be caused. I'm pleased to say to the honourable members to my right that he met Gillian Keegan, Anne Grant Shapps and the former Prime Minister's wife, and no event occurred. I asked Paul what George's message would be to this House, and the answers that Paul thought his dad would have said were characteristically robust. He was passionate about remembering his shipmates, those who gave their tomorrow for our today. He stayed in contact throughout his life with the daughter. I will draw my comments to a close. His messages were, don't be stupid, like my generation. Don't do it again. Don't listen to the stupid politicians. And most of all, we must have more compassion for each other. Thank you.
Richard Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the chance to participate in this debate, and can I welcome the Secretary of State to his place. Can I say also I'm delighted a fellow Scot has taken his place as Minister for Veterans and People, because Scottish communities have played such a vital role in the history of our military. And in my own constituency of Glenrothes and Mid-Fife, over 4,000 people have served in our armed forces. When we take part in our ceremonies of remembrance, they're important for us all. And for thousands of people in my constituency and their families, it will speak to their personal experience of service. One of the greatest privileges I've had in my career was to work for a veterans charity, Sight Scotland Veterans. Among the veterans we supported, too many had experienced isolation and loneliness. One of the veterans I worked for was William Montgomery, known to everyone as Monty, who had served in Germany, Cyprus and Northern Ireland before leaving the army in 1977. While serving in the Territorial Army, Monty suffered a head injury, which meant he could not work, and this in turn affected his mental health. Monty said, I'd gone from working and having the camaraderie and companionship of the Territorial Army to being on my own. The reality is that you might only speak to your Alexa device for days at a time, wishing her a Merry Christmas and no one else. It can make you feel suicidal. Monty now is an eloquent and effective campaigner on the need to provide better support for our veterans, which is our debt to them as a society. But as we've heard throughout this evening's debate, too often we fall short. That's why this government's commitment to put the Armed Forces Covenant fully into law and the commitment for an Armed Forces Commissioner is so important. In Scotland, the role of the Scottish Veterans Commissioner has been vital in assessing progress in Scotland in securing the aims of the Covenant. In her most recent report, while the Commissioner, Susie Hamilton, found progress in a number of areas, she also noted, disappointingly, progress towards the delivery of both the Veterans' Mental Health and Wellbeing pathway and the Veterans' Homelessness Prevention pathway remains notably slow. And I hope the Scottish Government will take careful note of these points. Too many veterans still face poor mental health and do not have the housing support they need. That's why the Prime Minister's commitment that we will pay all those who served us and house all veterans in housing need, why that commitment is so important. And in Fife, where our Armed Forces champion, Councillor Derek Noble himself served with 105th Regiment Royal Artillery, the aims of the Covenant are being taken forward through the work of the Council, and we are proud the Council has achieved the Covenant gold standard. Madam Deputy Speaker, our veterans are given so much for their country. We must ensure that we do not only mark this with gratitude and respect on Remembrance Day, but by ensuring our nation meets all our responsibilities to all our veterans.
Oshbabarinde.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's an honour to be able to pay tribute to our armed forces community in this debate today. And it's particularly special to be able to pay tribute to my late great-granddad, Flight Lieutenant Thomas Gittins. He was a tool salesman and he joined the RAF Reserves in the hope of becoming a pilot. But he was a man who was pretty small in stature, so he was never let near the cockpit. He fell at the first hurdle, despite almost being small enough to walk under it himself. Now, he did join, however, RAF Squadron number 196 as a rear gunner in Wellington and Lancaster bombers. And between 1940 and 45, he completed 51 missions, including towing gliders to transport soldiers into Normandy, D-Day. And for his service, he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, which was pretty rare for folks serving in the position that he did. But like so many war heroes, he was intensely humble about his grand achievements. He was too humble to say that his bravery contributed to the preservation of our democracy, too humble to accept that his service would mean that members of Parliament, including his great-grandson down the line, could sit right here and stand up for our country today due to his service. But like many war heroes, the atrocity of war took its toll on his mental health as he transitioned back to civilian life. And today we recognise those challenges as combat stress. And today also, thanks to so many volunteers across my wonderful constituency of Eastbourne, the sunniest in the UK, local veterans have access to more support than ever. This includes our Royal British Legion branch, chaired by Alan Leigh, who I recruited as my driving instructor down the line. And he is supported in that endeavour, chairing the RBL in Eastbourne, by his fab secretary, Daph Jeninaza. And I've also had the chance to meet inspirational veterans like Eric Deach and Brian Perry, who is known as the formidable poppy salesman of Tesco's Admiral Retail Park in St Anthony's of Eastbourne. Local support also exists in the form of the brilliant Eastbourne and District Veterans Association, whose incorporation as a CIC I was proud to lead. I also pay tribute to the local work of the wonderful Barry and Petra Coase and their dog Bella, who are involved in the Combat Stress charity, supporting veterans locally, and the Blue Van Drop-In Group too. We all need to go even further to support our armed forces, and I'm delighted to do that today.
Graham Downey.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I first begin by congratulating everyone who's made their maiden speeches this afternoon and this evening. To do it under a time pressure, I think, adds on an extra layer of complexity that I'm certainly glad that I did not have. As I did mention in my own maiden speech, I grew up on an RAF base in Berlin, and as you might expect, Remembrance was a huge part of my early memories. And those services always included veterans from the World Wars, but also from Korea, where my own grandfather served, the Falklands, and from the violence in Northern Ireland. During the election campaign, I was not surprised by the scale of the veteran community within my own constituency of Dunfermline and Dollar. The area has a strong naval tradition, and the rest of Fife a strong presence from the RAF, the Army and other units. What did strike me, however, was how spread out veterans were around the area, and in lots of cases where they were unaware themselves of the size of the veteran community within the local area. We must do more at a local level to bring those communities together, and what is clear is that the level of support across Scotland, and I'm sure the rest of the UK, is mixed, although I do fear in some areas Scotland is falling behind on these priorities, and it is a genuine sadness that there are not members from the Scottish National Party in the Chamber this evening. We must do better to coordinate those elements together. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to share a couple of particular stories of veterans from my own community and constituency. This weekend, I took my two daughters to their Carnegie Library, which includes a fantastic museum on local history, including the story of Alexander Malcolm McNeill, who died on the first day of the Battle of the Somme on the 1st of July 1916. The second story I would like to share, Madam Deputy Speaker, is that of Norman Bonner. Norman lived in the Garvick area of Dunfermline and served throughout the early part of the war as a Spitfire pilot with the Photo Reconnaissance Unit. On the 4th of July, he was killed when the Wellington aircraft he was in was crashed. He was buried in Dunfermline Cemetery and posthumously awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. I was pleased to recently meet with some of the team behind the restoration of Spitfire AA810, referred to by the Honourable Member earlier on, which was flown by Norman Bonner, and I hope to we can recognise those efforts by having a specific memorial to the sacrifices of the Photo Reconnaissance Unit. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to close by mentioning, as an Honourable Member did earlier on, about how we make sure we recognise those veterans who are not always immediately in our thoughts. I'm currently reading the book The Lion Above the Door by Anjali Rauf with my 10-year-old daughter Hannah. I'm only halfway through the book, but it is particularly focused on remembering those in India and the Far East who served in World War II, and I would recommend it to anyone in this House. Madam Deputy Speaker, the stories of people like Alexander and Norman are just the smallest sampling of what we must do to remember. But to return to the point, we must always ensure that remembrance is translated into supporting those who are currently serving as well as those who will serve in the future. Thank you.
Dr Alpington.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you. My constituency of Surrey Heath has a deep and historic connection with the UK Armed Forces. It is today home to ATC Purbright and a very substantial part of the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. This evening, though, I want to draw attention to two particular veterans who I've had the privilege to meet and get to know in Surrey Heath over the past few years. Their stories speak of the unevenness of veterans' experiences, representing communities within the wider Armed Forces family whose courage and sacrifice may be equal to others, but who've had to fight for justice and recognition. Carol Morgan had wanted to be in the army since she was a little girl. It was a commitment, a conviction, a vocation. And yet when she was only 24, Carol was unceremoniously discharged from the Women's Royal Army Corps solely because of who she loved. Although homosexuality was decriminalised in 1967, prior to the year 2000, if you were gay in the UK Armed Forces, you had to keep your identity and your feelings hidden. After being reported on by a colleague, Carol recalls the relentless interrogations into the most intimate details of her personal life, the countless humiliations that left her feeling like a criminal. For LGBT veterans, being found to be gay meant being discharged, the loss of career, a loss of livelihood, medals, pension, and in some cases, imprisonment. Tragically, the trauma of those experiences led to many to take their own lives. Thousands of LGBT veterans suffered long-term harm under this atrocious policy. Now, whilst I acknowledge that progress has undoubtedly been made, including an apology from the former Prime Minister, an LGBT Veterans Independent Review and a £50 million compensation fund, true justice remains elusive. For the approximately 4,000 veterans whose lives were irreparably altered, £12,500 is a meagre offering. I hope that the Government might use this budget and Remembrance season to reconsider the scale of that scheme and to give those veterans the recognition that they truly deserve. I'd also like to note the current furore around the Royal British Legion's poppy badge that incorporates the LGBT flag alongside it. Whilst the outrage might be reserved to the fringe television stations in the UK, it's a reminder that the injustices endured by many LGBT veterans are still far from resolved or reconciled, even now in 2024. Secondly, I wish to pay tribute to the Gurkha community whose regimental headquarters are in Surrey Heath. For over 2 centuries, soldiers from Nepal have fought bravely for the British Army in the UK's most pivotal conflicts, from both world wars to the Falklands, Bosnia, Iraq and Afghanistan. We owe them a debt of gratitude for their loyalty, their courage and their sacrifice. I particularly want to honour Kaji Sherpa, who I met just a few months ago, a former Gurkha officer and the first serving Gurkha to be granted UK citizenship. As we approach another Remembrance Day, we should commit ourselves to remembering that for some, the fight for justice continues. Thank you.
Steve Young.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Armed Forces Covenant is a critical document that has the capability to positively impact the lives of service personnel and veterans, and I'm very pleased that the Labour Government has committed to enshrining this in law to ensure that nobody from the Armed Forces family is disadvantaged in any way by their military service to our nation by making it a legally binding commitment. And I'm proud that West Notts College in my constituency of Mansfield was recently awarded Defence Employer Recognition Silver Award for supporting the Armed Forces Covenant. I congratulate them and look forward to seeing many other organisations in my constituency take this very important step. As an employer of a veteran within my parliamentary office, I can see the skills that are invested in service personnel right through their training that continue to deliver within the services of my office. And speaking as a former CEO, it's clear to me the advantages to business that the application of armed forces ethos and work ethic provides. And I know that my honourable friend, the member for Birmingham, Selly Oak, recounts an operation that he conducted in Afghanistan, and he speaks of the commitment that those he commanded were able to apply to their mission because of the certainty of the wraparound support they would receive should they require it on the front line. It's now time, Madam Deputy Speaker, that society and government delivers on that as part of a post-service support package in return for the commitment of our armed forces. And finally, I recently hosted a parliamentary reception for Care After Combat, a charity that mentors veterans in the justice system. I'd like to thank the more than 100 parliamentarians that took the time to visit and understand the issues further. Veterans are the largest occupational group represented in the justice system, which is a very uncomfortable statistic. And listening to the accounts of the charity's work and the veterans' stories, it was clear to me that veterans have a lot to contribute to society, including those with experience of the justice system.
Yeah. Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to talk about an issue today affecting a very small number of British families and British veterans. It's the nuclear test veterans issue in relation to Christmas Island. For Stephen Greenwood, a constituent of mine from Columpton, it affects him personally. His father, his late father, served in the Royal Air Force and was one of many servicemen sent to Christmas Island in the late 1950s under Operation Grapple. These tests, designed to develop the UK's nuclear weapons capabilities, subjected military personnel to dangerous levels of radiation, with little recognition or concern about the long-term consequences. Stephen's father shared with his son the one abiding memory, the very vivid memory of seeing the bones of his fingers as he was shielding his eyes from the nuclear detonations, the disbelief as the flash illuminated the bones in front of him. And like so many, he later suffered from cancer. The impact did not stop there. The veterans, or rather the deceased servicemen's children, had some quite stark health disparities. Some, those were born before Stephen's father was exposed to the detonation, were born with very good health, whereas those siblings born afterwards were in really very poor health. And this is a pattern that Stephen has seen not just in his own family, but in the families of other veterans who he has encountered since. In the run-up to the election, the last government went so far in making sure that a medal was cast to recognise those service people who were involved in Operation Grapple. And in opposition, the now government did suggest that they could go further. And those veterans who I've talked to, for example, the Sidmouth Royal British Legion, certainly feel that the government does need to go further. It would like to see an annual remembrance event of the sort that we held in Sidmouth on the 31st of August to honour the service of those dwindling number of veterans who saw the nuclear detonations in the 1950s in the Pacific. And additionally, they are advocating for compensation for those veterans who have suffered health issues due to exposure to radiation. Veterans like Stephen's late father and their families, who've endured the legacy of Christmas Island, cannot afford to wait another decade, and they are demanding action in this Parliament now. Thank you.
Laura Kirk-Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to share my deep gratitude to the people who make up the Armed Forces community in my constituency of Aylesbury. This includes serving troops and service families, the cadets and reservists at the Army Reserve Centre on Oxford Road, and of course our veterans, of which we have almost 3,000. Each and every one of them makes an immense contribution to our country. In Aylesbury and the villages, Remembrance is embedded in our communities. In the heart of our town, the War Memorial in Market Square commemorates the 264 soldiers who died in the First World War, the 106 soldiers who died in the Second World War, as well as Simon J. Cockton, one of the crew of 4 of an army helicopter that was shot down by friendly fire over the Falkland Islands in June 1982. Inscribed on the memorial are the prescient words, "Their memory lives forevermore." Successive generations have lived up to these words, and we will too. We will never forget. Helping to preserve this memory is the Aylesbury branch of the Royal British Legion, who I thank for their work, including Philip Turner, Lorna Moyer and Brian Morris, who serve as President, Chairman and Vice Chairman respectively. I attended the Aylesbury branch's launch of the Poppy Appeal at the Friars Square Shopping Centre. We watched a very moving performance by the Aylesbury School of Dance, a very powerful 2-minute silence, and it was great to see the poppy selling get underway quickly. I want to take a moment to recognise the contributions of Commonwealth and other personnel from across the world who have often been overlooked in commemorations, as others have said tonight, but have played a vital role in protecting and defending the UK and deserve their rightful place in our national story. I welcome the fact that among the wreaths to be laid in Aylesbury on Remembrance Sunday will be a marigold wreath to remember the Indian troops who fought and died in the World Wars. Finally, I want to note that we must remember not just through words, but through deeds. I'm proud that, for example, our government is backing our armed forces communities by putting the Armed Forces Covenant fully into law and establishing an independent Armed Forces Commissioner to improve service life. I'm also proud of the measures that this government is taking to ensure veterans have access to employment, housing and mental health support that they so desperately need. We're forever indebted to those who serve now, those who have served in the past, and those who have lost their lives in doing so. With our work to strengthen support for our armed forces communities and our veterans, we will honour them.
Luke Taylor.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I also had the opportunity a few weeks ago to meet with representatives of Spitfire AA 810, of which the honourable members for Dunfermline Dollar and Durivor Merinath have already given fine tribute. I think it's appropriate to repeat the incredible contribution of the PRU, which took more than 26 million images of enemy operations installations throughout the war. Those were then used in the Cabinet War Rooms, now the Churchill War Rooms, located underneath the Treasury, and was instrumental in the planning of major operations throughout the war. Despite this incredible contribution, and with one of the lowest survival rates of the war, the life expectancy in the PRU was around 2.5 months. There is no national memorial to the unit. That, I feel, is a troubling oversight, and why the Spitfire AA 810 project is leading the campaign to establish such a memorial to the pilots and navigators. I would like to take the opportunity to mark the contribution of 4 veteran pilots from my constituency of Sutton and Cheam, 3 of whom gave their lives, all of whom would be commemorated by this project. Cyril Harley Sergeant Kirkus joined the 241 Squadron and flew armed reconnaissance missions in Hurricane aircraft. He was killed on reconnaissance operations in Tunisia on the 23rd of April 1943, aged just 27. Donald Neville Galai Hatchard lived with his wife Joyce in Cheam before the war. As a trained photographer, his experience in the PRU saw him posted to work with the American 97th Bomber Squadron operating in Tunisia. In April 1943, he was put on an American Boston aircraft to photograph the results of a raid on Tunis, but he was killed at the age of 31 when the aircraft was hit by anti-aircraft fire and is buried in Tunisia. Desmond Lawrence Matthewman started the war in Bomber Command, flying with 51 Squadron. In February of 1941, he brought home a damaged bomber from a mission over Bremen, where the tail flying controls had been damaged, making the aircraft almost impossible to control. Once over the UK, he and his crew jumped by parachute, an act which earned him his first DFC. On August the 8th, 1944, he and navigator William Stopford took off on a photographic mission to Munich, but were met by the new German Me-262 jet fighter.
Matthewman and Stopford was shot down over Ulstadt in what has been recognised as the first jet aircraft combat kill in history. Ronald Henry Smith, DFC, lived in North Cheam and attended Sutton High School. He joined up in May 1939 and flew Bristol Blenheims with 25 Squadron.
Will he give way?
Absolutely, thank you.
I'm very grateful for him giving way, and I'm so grateful for him for putting these names on record, because I think it is absolutely essential now that we have a memorial for these men who lost their lives so bravely.
Thank you very much, and I completely agree that the importance of the memorial cannot be overstated. With the battle over, Smythe spent a short time flying Hurricane fighters, and in December 1943 he joined the 541 Photographic Reconnaissance Squadron, commanding reconnaissance operations from Gibraltar. He was awarded the DFC in July 1945 for his work in reconnaissance and ended his time in the RF in October 1945. Following his incredible wartime service, he returned to his pre-war job in the stationery office before retiring in 1980 and passing away in 2017, aged 96. I think it's only right that we take this opportunity to commemorate the contributions of Cyril, Donald, Desmond and Ronald. And also, I'd like to ask the Minister if he would meet with the campaigners for the Spitfire AA810 project and help them with their campaign to honour the brave contributions of the PRU by delivering the first memorial to their work, proposed to be located outside the Churchill War Rooms, where their contribution made such a difference to the course of the war.
Darlington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, I think our message today from across the House is thank you. Thank you to those who served, thank you to those who died in combat, and thank you to the families who have supported our armed forces to be able to do so. In Milton Keynes, the City Council is proud of its Armed Forces Covenant, and as Housing Cabinet member, I made sure that we fulfilled that covenant by giving the highest level of housing to our armed forces, and I'm proud that that is now party policy and government policy. I'd also like to just do a shout out to the Milton Keynes Armed Forces and Veterans Breakfast Clubs, who are absolutely a lifeline to those who are currently serving and their veterans. But I'd like to focus my comments on the 7,500 women, 6 out of 10 who were uniformed, who served at Bletchley Park. Often they are forgotten. They were in the Women's Royal Naval Service, WRENS, the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, WAF, and the Auxiliary Territorial Service. They worked around the clock during the war effort to keep Colossus and the bomb machines running so that we could break the Nazi and its allies' codes. Their efforts shortened the war by nearly 2 years, saving countless lives. Their recruitment was a challenge to MI6, as they'd never recruited women before. They started recruiting linguists, mathematicians, engineers, and even used a 12-minute cryptic crossword competition to identify talent. But these women didn't have it easy. When Winston Churchill visited, he said, "I told you to leave no stone unturned to get staff, but I had no idea you would take me literally." There were so many famous women who worked tirelessly during those years, but it wasn't till the 1970s that anybody, including some of their own, had an idea of how much impact they had on our war effort. They were also not allowed to be classified as code breakers. They weren't allowed the title nor the pay. But today, in this House, we can call them veterans, and we can give them the respect they duly deserve. Finally, one of them wrote this poem: "In the years yet to come, when grandchildren are many, I want you to know I did before you were a granny. You'll say to the children, as proud as can be, in the last war, my darling, a WAF at BP."
Alex Baker.
Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Member of Parliament for the home of the British Army, it is my honour to speak in this debate on remembrance and veterans. I want to use my time to share a story from a veteran of the Royal Marines who celebrate their birthday today. My constituent has given me permission to share his story in this debate, though I have changed his name to protect his privacy. John served our country with honour. He was discharged from the Marines after 3 years of service. But life outside the military was hard. His mental health spiralled. he ended up homeless, sleeping rough on the streets. So he went to the local authority for help. And this is the part that shocked me, Madam Deputy Speaker, because John was told that before they could help him, they would first have to confirm that he really was homeless. Rather than taking John at his word, they told him he would have to continue sleeping rough in a named location for 2 weeks and wait for an outreach worker to visit him and verify that he was homeless. John did as he was ordered, following what he has been taught by his service, but he found staying in the same place meant he was targeted with verbal and physical abuse. So he moved and kept moving. The cycle went on for years. Eventually, he got a diagnosis of PTSD, complex PTSD, and was referred to Courage. Even then, it took several years more in temporary accommodation and witnessing a violent incident before Courage and Help for Heroes were able to get John the specialist accommodation in my constituency that has allowed him to start to move forward with his life. I know just how great a step it was for John to share his story with me. There are 3 things I take from this. The first is that we owe our veterans much more than our silence and respect on Armistice Day. It is our duty to speak up whenever the systems that come from this place are falling short. Second, safe and accessible housing is vital. That's why I'm so proud to hear the Prime Minister announce this government's commitment to housing all veterans just a few weeks ago. Third, John's experience tells me that our commitment to respecting every veteran must reach through every level of government department and every level of staff if we are to succeed, from the Secretary of State down to every member of frontline staff. That is the culture change needed to deliver for people like John who have served our country. The spirit of remembrance is defined by what we do for one another today and the contribution every one of us can make, and how, with shared effort, we can build a greater legacy to those who served us now and in the future.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's appropriate that I'm following my honourable friend, the member for Aldershot, as I intend to speak on the mental health support for veterans. And ahead of the debate today, I had a conversation with a very good friend of mine who proudly serves in the Guards. And what I'm about to say reflects comments that he's given to me, both from himself and consultation with his comrades and their personal experience. So first of all, mental health is at the forefront of concerns for those leaving the armed forces. Serving personnel receive excellent mental health care from specialist clinicians, which is available for up to 6 months from discharge, but civilian services often do not appreciate the toll that military life takes on the mental and physical health of veterans, and so they rely on charities, such as the Veterans Football Club, to fill that gap. And I was very pleased to hear the Secretary of State recognise the support of veterans' charities. Veterans tell me as well that the pressures of cuts in the armed forces impact on their mental health. And we as politicians must be sure not to ask individual servicemen and women to take up that strain, but instead ask how we can support our troops and ensure that service personnel know that they are appreciated, they will be properly paid, there will be time for a family life. We must also normalise discussions around emotions and feelings to tackle the tragically high level of suicide amongst veterans. This is a silent killer, affecting people of all ages and all ranks. It does not discriminate, but it's the tip of an iceberg of depression, anxiety and stress, and it can be treated by an early intervention. Young people and our veterans are losing their lives not only from a lack of support, but an ignorance of the support that is available. As a signatory to the Armed Forces Covenant, I welcome this government's commitment to put that covenant on a statutory footing. Veterans need to hear from us that they are not just a number. There is no stigma attached to their service, and once they have left the forces, we will care for them in the same way that they took care of us.
The Collier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
It's an honour to speak in this debate ahead of Remembrance Day as we pay tribute to all those who have served our country and remember those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. Each year we gather to recognise the bravery of our veterans, but true gratitude goes beyond these moments. It means showing up for them when it counts in real and meaningful ways. As the MP for Burton and Uttoxeter, I'm proud to represent a community with a long-standing tradition of service. Many families across Burton and Uttoxeter and our surrounding villages have stories of loved ones who have served and sacrificed. I see veterans every day who continue to give back, contributing to our communities long after they've hung up their uniforms. People like Carlton Wilkin, a veteran of the Mercian Regiment, who leads the Poppy Appeal in Burton every year, helping us remember the values our veterans live by. They volunteer, they mentor, they inspire, quietly setting an example of resilience and dedication for all of us. We are also fortunate to have the National Memorial Arboretum on our doorstep, a powerful place of reflection and tribute to our armed forces. I would welcome all honourable and right honourable members to visit the Arboretum to fully appreciate the courage and sacrifices that are represented there. But let's be clear that our gratitude must be matched with support. Charities like Care After Combat offer a lifeline for veterans as they transition into civilian life, providing mental health support and giving veterans renewed purpose. These organisations show us what it means to truly honour service with action. In my role, I am committed, as is this government, to ensuring that veterans in Burton, Uttoxeter and across the country have access to the services that they need, from mental health support, housing to employment opportunities. We owe them nothing less. Our responsibility is to make sure that they can thrive and meet their sacrifices with practical, lasting action. So as we come together in this remembrance season, let's make a promise that our gratitude will be lived and not just spoken. Let's commit to being there for veterans as they were there for us, by building a country and community where they're fully supported every step of the way.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As we approach this time of remembrance, it is fitting that the National Parliament of the UK reflects on the sacrifice made by so many men and women to ensure we have the right to be here in this place and that our democratic values prevail. Indeed, I understand that the First World War claimed 19 of our predecessors, while the Second claimed 23. And while we think of the contribution of our veterans, I think it's also wise to take a moment to think about those non-combatants who are also often the victims of war. On the 13th of March 1941, Bankhead Primary School in my constituency was hit by a Luftwaffe bomb. Fortunately, the school had been evacuated, but it was serving as a civil defence station, and some 40 people were killed. The reason for this strike was never fully explained. It could have been a remnant of the Clydebank Blitz, with one of the Luftwaffe pilots dropping bombs to lighten the load on the way home, or it could have been because of the nearby railway marshalling yards in Yoker. We'll never know, but the fact is that 40 people, civilians, died. Some years ago, a local Knightswood man, Terence McCourt, began a campaign to have a war memorial erected in his area. Terence's campaign was successful, and a small but very beautiful garden of remembrance was established in my constituency of Glasgow West. Regular events take place there to remember important dates such as Armistice Day, VJ Day and VE Day. And on Remembrance Sunday, many of us will stand in Glasgow's George Square to watch the march past the veterans and current servicemen and women too, as well as representatives of the emergency and uniformed services. Sadly, but inevitably, the number of veterans diminishes every year. So it's more important than ever that their memory is not allowed to fade. Unfortunately, neither of the world wars were in fact the war to end all wars. The events of the last century are sadly a testament to that. And as parliamentarians, we must be dedicated to the eradication of conflict through peaceful and democratic means. I hope a worthy objective to which we all subscribe. but one which in this increasingly dangerous, conflict-torn world remains in peril. For the sake of this generation and generations yet unborn, we must redouble our efforts to support diplomatic, peaceful means in order to resolve even the most seemingly intractable situations. After all, you don't make peace only by talking to your friends, and as Gandhi put it, an eye for an eye only ends up making the whole world blind.
Julia Minns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. At the heart of my constituency lies Carlisle Castle, home to the Border Regiment Museum, the excellent Cumbria Museum of Military Life. The Border Regiment has a long and proud record of service and was the first British unit to join a major engagement by glider during the invasion of Sicily in the Second World War. The regiment went on to serve throughout the Italian campaign of World War II, and it is to those who served in that campaign that I wish to pay particular tribute this evening. My dad was just 20 when he set sail for the Italian mainland, but the liberation of Italy had begun some months earlier with the invasion of Sicily, an invasion that cost the lives of 6,000 Allied troops, including men from Carlisle's Border Regiment, who were killed when their gliders failed to make land. The invasion of the mainland followed, but the Allies encountered increasingly difficult terrain. In particular, the town of Monte Cassino became the scene of some of the most hellish encounters of the Second World War. Finally, in the early hours of the 18th of May, the British and Polish troops surrounded Cassino and forced a German retreat. A couple of weeks later, Rome fell, marking a significant milestone in the Italian campaign. But sadly, for those that served, their recognition was overshadowed by the events on the Normandy beaches, and to add further insult to injury, a perception grew that those serving in Italy were sitting out the real fighting of the Second World War, and the myth of the D-Day Dodgers was born. Nothing could have been further from the truth. Infantry losses on both sides made Italy the most costly campaign of the Second World War in terms of casualties suffered by infantry forces. That's why I believe in this, the 80th year since Monte Cassino, it is right that that battle is commemorated as other key battles of the Second World War have rightly been.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is an honour to be given an opportunity to speak this evening as we look ahead to this year's Remembrance events across the country, and as we recognise the service and courage of the exceptional men and women who help safeguard our values and freedom. My contribution today seeks to commemorate some of the local effort from my Alloa and Grangemouth constituency. Madam Deputy Speaker, perhaps the biggest contribution of Alloa to the D-Day landings took place at the now-gone MacLeod and Sons shipyard. The workers there laboured day and night to refit ships for war, including around 130 of the tank landing craft for Operation Neptune. Indeed, a message from their lordships at the Admiralty was sent to MacLeod and Sons after the war, congratulating the entire workforce for their magnificent effort during hostilities. And over in Grangemouth, what was planned to be the country's largest commercial airfield became a fighter base to defend against bombing raids. And once the fear of airstrikes had subsided, it was designated as a training centre for daring young pilots to learn flying the iconic Spitfire. More than 60 young men from all over Britain and the Commonwealth, and also from Poland, Holland and then what was Czechoslovakia, died as student pilots, along with some 20 ground crew, also paying the ultimate price while serving there. And today, a replica Spitfire on Bowness Road reminds us of their sacrifice, with thanks to the members of the 1333 Grangemouth Air Cadet Squadron for their efforts in pushing for the memorial there more than a decade ago. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, veterans of our armed forces deserve not just our respect and gratitude, but also our practical and meaningful help as they seek to find a place in civilian life. And I commend organisations such as the Falkirk Veterans and the Wee County Veterans from Clackmannanshire. The bond amongst our military personnel extends well beyond service,
And veteran groups, such as those in my constituency, play a phenomenal role in so many ways. Currently, there is a difference in opinion between the Royal British Legion and many in the veterans community as to what the consequences of cutting the Armed Services Advice Project will be. Personally, I feel that the veterans have legitimate concerns regarding the removal of ASAP. Some veterans have told me that an in-person interaction with an ASAP advisor was the difference between life and death. And on the face of it, I share those same reservations that many veterans have, as replacing ASAP with a call centre could be potentially fatal. A potentially fatal reduction in the service provision. And I urge RBL to reconsider. Because after the last 14 years, this country has seen what happens when austerity takes hold and vital services are sacrificed. And everyone, and especially our veterans, deserve better.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a newly elected member to this House, it was my great privilege and honour to attend the opening of the House of Commons Gardens of Remembrance today and place my cross of remembrance there on behalf of my constituents of West Dunbartonshire. Across West Dunbartonshire, just as we do across the nation, we will gather to honour those who made the ultimate sacrifice to defend our freedoms and protect our way of life. One of the memorials I will attend on Remembrance Sunday is at Clydebank Town Hall, my hometown. Our Town Hall memorial, of course, contains the names of those fallen in all wars. It includes the names, Madam Deputy Speaker, of 5 brothers, Andrew, Walter, James, John and Daniel Munn, who all perished in the First World War. 5 brothers, all lost. It is so symbolic of the scale of suffering and sacrifice of our nation. Clydebank also suffered dreadfully during the Second World War, across the nights of the 13th and 14th of March 1941, the Blitz. Clydebank suffered the worst destruction of civilian loss of life in all of Scotland. At least 1,200 people lost their lives, and of the 12,000 homes in Clydebank, only 8 remain undamaged. In West Dunbartonshire, we are deeply proud of our armed forces personnel, veterans and the families who support them. Theirs is the ultimate public service. Therefore, as a government, we must ensure our veterans have access to the support they need. We must commit to supporting those who serve and served us. The Royal British Legion and Poppy Scotland Manifesto includes recommendations that this government can take to improve the lives of our armed forces community. One such recommendation is Ask the Question, which seeks to ensure all public bodies ask individuals whether they or an immediate family member has served in the armed forces. This would then be recorded and published to understand needs and provide appropriate support. Across this House, we can truly remember by ensuring a better deal for our armed forces community remains high on our parliamentary agenda. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Powerful and moving contributions, not least from Dave Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I closely associate myself with all the remarks that have been made this evening about the work of the Royal British Legion and all they do to support remembrance, particularly in the month of November. And I know whenever November rolls around, I make sure I clear some time out to remember Charles Leslie Whitehead and William Arnold Robertson, my tide and my grandpa, who saw service in the Second World War and in the Pacific in Korea, respectively. I'm struggling, I've lost my thought. We owe our veterans so much more than 2 minutes per year, Madam Deputy Speaker, and remembrance should go much further than just Armistice Day and just Remembrance Sunday. It should be something that anybody, anywhere in the country can take part in at any time, just by taking that time to remember somebody, be that on a birthday, an anniversary, or just a Tuesday. That is why I am so proud to host the National Memorial Arboretum in my constituency of Lichfield. It is a wonderful venue, it is a wonderful location and a fantastic place for people to carry out that remembrance if they so choose. There are over 400 memorials at the Arboretum now, and I would strongly advise any honourable or right honourable member who has not had the opportunity to visit there yet to do so that they can take the opportunity to remember those people who are pertinent to them, or even those strangers who we have never met and we will never meet. but who gave their time and who gave themselves, and in some cases paid that ultimate sacrifice to protect our right way of life. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
We now come to the front benches and the Shadow Minister, Mr Bowie.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a great privilege to rise to respond on behalf of His Majesty's loyal opposition in this debate. I'd like to congratulate all maiden speakers in this debate today, not least my honourable friend, the member for Reigate, for an excellent maiden speech. And although not a maiden speech, I'd like to mention as well the honourable member for Portsmouth North and thank her for mentioning especially those who are lost at sea. It's far too often overlooked that those who were lost at sea in various conflicts have no grave to which families can visit, but their sacrifice was no less important and should no less be remembered at this time of remembrance. It is a rare thing to sit in this chamber and enjoy a debate where there is so much common cause across both sides of the House. I'd like to join with other colleagues in congratulating the Duke of York and Albany's Maritime Regiment of Foot on their 360th anniversary, and I do not believe the vicious rumour doing the rounds in Parliament right now that that was the name borne by the Royal Marines when the Minister joined up all those years ago. It is, of course, as it should be, that we join together as a nation, look towards remembrance as one. And Remembrance Sunday and Armistice Day, when we pause, reflect and remember and pay thanks to all of those who have given the ultimate sacrifice that allows us to live in the peace and freedom we enjoy in our country today. Remembrance, of course, means different things to different people. When the last post sounds in Ballater in 2 weeks' time, I will be thinking of my great-uncle Samuel Coyle, who fell at Gallipoli 1 week short of his 21st birthday in 1915 and lies buried at Pink Farm Cemetery in Turkey. I'll think of my great-grandfather, who endured and survived the Somme battlefield, my paternal grandfather, who fought with the 8th Army at El Alamein, Sicily, Italy, France and Germany, and survived to tell the tale, my maternal grandfather, who for over 2 decades served in the Royal Navy, my godfather, a Royal Marine, who served from the Falklands to Northern Ireland. But I will also think of my friends who served and are still serving in far more recent conflicts and operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, the various but less reported naval operations of the last 20 years, a continued presence in the South Atlantic, our oil field patrols off of Iraq, and the anti-piracy operations in Somalia, to name but a few. We all, as we have heard this afternoon, remember individuals, family, close friends who chose to serve our country, were prepared to, and some of whom did, pay the ultimate sacrifice, and we do remember them. Now, when we collectively think of remembrance as a nation, when we think of veterans, for many the image conjured is of the old soldier who landed at D-Day proudly marching with his oppos past the cenotaph, a survivor of a long-distant conflict. And yes, of course, they remain rightly at the forefront of our thoughts this year as we commemorate 80 years since D-Day, Monte Cassino and other hugely significant operations in that world conflict, which was fought to defend freedom and democracy, our victory in which remains the reason that we can stand here in this place today. We remain forever in the debt of that greatest generation. But we must also remember, too, those new veterans from far more recent conflicts, that far smaller group of men and women who fought far from our shores in the name of their Queen and country, but for whom, unlike previous generations, did not return to a country with a shared experience of war and conflict. In many cases, to a country that didn't really want to know. Being a veteran of a late 20th century or early 21st century conflict is, in 2024, far removed from the experiences of those who fought between 1914-18 and 1939 and 1945. And supporting that, this new generation, is far harder for those charities and organisations that do so much unseen work all year round, not just during this tide of remembrance. It was for this new generation of former servicemen and women that the former Veterans Minister, Johnny Mercer, to whom I pay tribute, was determined to fight. And that's why he was determined to make this country the best in the world to which to be a veteran. And that's why we as a government established the Office for Veterans Affairs, put the Armed Forces Covenant into law, set up the Defence Transition Service, providing tailored support to help service people with their transition to civilian life, launched Operation Fortitude to end homelessness, Operation Prosper to support veterans into work after they leave the armed forces, Operation Restore to support the physical needs of veterans, and Operation Courage to support veterans' mental health. We invested £400 million to modernise thousands of military homes, provided funding for armed forces charities to carry out their vital work, introduced a new veterans rail card to help veterans reconnect both with loved ones and new training and work opportunities. And we supported veterans through the provisions in our Overseas Operations Act and the Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy and Reconciliation Act, the repeal and replacement of which I know the Minister is aware, rightly causing concern in the community of those veterans who fought during the Troubles there. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are near unique as a nation in honouring the memory of all those who have fallen, those who have served and those who serve in the way that we do. It is to our credit as a country. There are still those groups that do feel forgotten. For example, as already spoken about today, the veterans of our nuclear tests, many still fighting for recognition for what they were asked to do and for what they endured many years on for their country. The Photographic Reconnaissance Unit of the RAF, again mentioned today, the unit with one of the highest attrition rates in World War II, but with still no national memorial. They must also be remembered in the coming days. But this year, when the last post sounds, some 16 years since, as a very young sub-lieutenant, I had the privilege of meeting the 3 remaining veterans of World War I, Harry Patch, Henry Allingham and Bill Stone at the Cenotaph, as we marked 90 years since the end of that war, the war supposedly to end all wars. Let us pause and think of that unseen veteran that walk among us today, those who did not return, their friends, their families still living with the loss, and also remember those who, as we sit here tonight, remain prepared to give everything for our nation. Let us recommit to do for them what a grateful nation should, and let us redouble our efforts to truly make this country the best in the world in which to be a veteran. Thank you very much.
We now come to the Minister, Minister Cairns.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is indeed 360 years since the formation of the Royal Marines, and they're still going strong. I'll refuse from taking advice from the Honourable Member on face cream, but nevertheless, it's a privilege to take the salute just the other day from both the Commandant General of the Royal Marines and indeed the Commandant of the US Marine Corps, which just demonstrates that really strong tie across the pond with the US between those Marine units. I'm grateful to the Honourable and Right Honourable members for their thoughtful reflections on Remembrance today, and of course the contributions of veterans make for this country. We've heard moving contributions from a number of members, reflecting on their personal experience of service. As those will testify, I think there's an unspoken oath of allegiance between service personnel. Indeed, I think it needs no bounds. It is the glue that holds the force together, and that oath is always extended to the fallen on the battlefield and beyond. For serving personnel and veterans, Remembrance is an enduring reflection of that oath. And on the 11th hour of the 11th day, as I do on that day, I will remember the individuals who have gone before us, but also those who have stood next to, who have been killed or wounded. And after 5 tours of Afghanistan, 1 of Northern Ireland, multiple of Arabian Gulf, Eastern Europe and Africa, there have been many. Importantly, we must remember those who will never see that smile again, or see the laugh, or hold them close once more. It's a time for them. And those that did not come home to see their children, their partners, or indeed their loved ones, or indeed their friends. It is our duty to remember them all. But remembrance is not only about fallen comrades and veterans. It's a rare moment when the nation comes together, from Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England. And it's a reminder to everyone in every generation across the whole country that the freedoms we all enjoy, the freedom of speech, equality, the quality of life, they were all hard fought for, and indeed hard won. Freedom is not free, and it is something in the fractious world we live in today that individually or collectively we should not take for granted. Those freedoms are forged from the sacrifice of the young men and women of the Army, Navy and our Air Force, who stepped forward when their country needed them. The sacrifices of the few who are still owed so much by the many. The sacrifices on the high seas, in the air, the beaches, on the landing grounds, in the fields and in the streets. From World War I to Operation Overlord, where they secured a beachhead in Normandy that would free a continent from Nazi tyranny and usher in the rules-based international system. The sacrifices of 80,000 British service personnel who fought in the forgotten war on the Korean Peninsula to uphold the rights and freedoms enshrined in that rules-based international system. All memorialised in stones outside the MOD, of which one says, distant obligation, honourably discharged. The sacrifices in the South Atlantic, on the open water, in the skies and windswept heaths, for the right for Falkland Islanders to choose their own sovereign future. The sacrifices of service personnel on desert fatigues, who liberated Kuwait and fought in Iraq, and those in the operational areas who I served alongside in the long troubles of Northern Ireland, the Middle East, Africa, Afghanistan, Eastern Europe, who sacrificed so much to uphold the right to self-determination and give freedom and democracy a chance to take root. And the sacrifices, indeed, we can't talk about because we don't comment on certain issues. It is thanks to all those who've served and sacrificed, who we honour on Remembrance Day, that we here can sit as democratically elected MPs and debate the future of this wonderful country. Few, if any, outside in the armed forces sign a contract that puts their life indeed on the line. And what I've found is that those that have served or continue to serve often pay the price for that service. Through their long-term mental or physical scars, the impacts on families, on their children, or through the painful memories, or indeed the longing for the camaraderie and the service they left behind. It is of my opinion, Madam Deputy Speaker, that those that serve through one way or another serve until the day they die. And that is why this Government of Service is committed to standing with members of our armed forces and their families long after they leave the services.
My honourable and gallant friend give way.
Yes.
I thank my honourable and gallant friend for giving way. Sid Little was part of the team which delivered life-saving supplies to Mount Sinjar on 9th of August 2014 in the operation known as Operation Shader. Flight Sergeant Little lost his life this weekend to cancer. Would my gallant and my honourable and gallant friend agree with me that service people face some of the greatest challenges on their exit from service, and agree the importance of the veterans' strategy in ensuring that their challenges aren't equal to those which they faced whilst they were serving?
I'd like to thank the honourable member. There's few fights as valiant as that against the barbaric regime of ISIS, and my thought goes to the member's constituent and indeed his family and loved ones that were left behind. This government is absolutely committed to supporting veterans' welfare and indeed those who are serving as we look forward, and there'll be more details to follow. But as a veteran and as a minister for veterans, and as a minister also responsible for people and personnel, it's a commitment that I do not take lightly. This government has already ensured that those who defend democracy will have the right to exercise that democracy at the polling station. Within just over 100 days, we put the Veterans' ID cards as a form of voter ID. The Prime Minister has also confirmed that veterans will rightly be prioritised to access housing. And we're further determined to deliver on our manifesto commitments to fully incorporate the Armed Forces Covenant into law and get rid of the postcode lottery, to support mental health, employment and the housing supports that veterans need. And we'll also scrap visa fees for non-UK veterans who have served for 4 or more years, and indeed for their families. But I would like to take this moment to congratulate the individuals who stood up today and gave their maiden speech. Some fantastic speeches themselves, in particular the honourable member from Nuneaton and of course Stafford, who outlined so many veterans' issues, but also the comprehensive military presence within their constituency. Also would like to pay tribute to the multiple individuals with military experience in the House today. The individual from Huntingdon who served in 2010, I will have probably dropped into the area he was and was very well hosted by either his regiment or indeed brigade, often met with a fiery reception but some good banter on the ground. I think it's a great tribute to the House that we have so many people with military experience, and I, like all members, look forward to their contributions as we work forward in this great place. Several issues were raised today. First of all, from the Honourable Member of Reigate, Dyford and Mariner, Dunfermline, Dollar, Sutton and Cheam, was really a tribute to remember the brave pilots of the photography and reconnaissance units that did so much intelligence gathering during the Second World War. Without their work, it's quite simple, none of those operations would take place. And with one of the highest casualty rates, I think it was a 40% plus casualty rate of all of those in the skies, it's absolutely a tribute to move forward with a memorial, and I fully support that. Secondly, from the Honourable Member from Dyford and Mariner, I met the Welsh Commissioner, Colonel Phillips, last Thursday. I spoke to him about his role, responsibilities and potential changes that may be moving forward, and we spoke for a good hour and a half on that. Several veterans today, several honourable members today have brought up the issues of Northern Ireland. It's worth noting our government recognises the important service of veterans and sacrifices they made to keep people safe in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. I myself am a Northern Ireland veteran, and I give you my word that any individual or any veteran will get the legal and welfare support they require to ensure that the stresses of any action that we move forward with are minimised to the smallest possible moment. Several honourable members have also brought up various charities. It's worth noting across the veteran sector and the armed forces community there's over 1,000 charities, and they are primarily based on individuals who give up their spare time to support the armed forces and the veterans themselves. And I think it's worthwhile as we move forward to Remembrance Day not to just remember those that have served or are serving, but also all those that support the individuals in the armed forces, primarily the amazing charitable third sector base we have in the UK that does such an amazing role. The honourable member for Glenrothes and Mid-Fife also brought up mental health. It's worth noting Up Courage has had 30,000 referrals, and it's actually doing a fantastic job. I've visited multiple different NHS trusts that are delivering a fantastic partnership to ensure veterans get the correct mental health support they require. The treatment of LGBT community from 1967 to 2000 was completely and utterly abhorrent. Some of the stories I've heard have been absolutely harrowing, and I've had the pleasure to attend the LGBT Awards just last week. The Lord Etherton Review has delivered 32 of 49, and we're working really hard to deliver an appropriate financial redress scheme to ensure we close out Lord Etherton's review in a timely and effective manner. I've also had the great pleasure of meeting with nuclear test veterans, and that's been absolutely superb. We've actually built up a relationship with a cadence of meetings now to ensure there's communication, education, but also to look into some of the files issues that they have, and we're working on that with them collaboratively. It would be unfitting of me to finish this speech without saying I've heard some harrowing stories today in here of the sacrifices paid by so many, but particularly the loss of so many loved ones, but in particular the honourable member for Strangeford, who lost some of his loved ones in the Troubles, but also hearing some of the amazing stories from some of our longest serving veterans, including Flight Lieutenant Harry Richardson, who's now over 100 years old, which is truly remarkable, and the honourable member from Mid-Sussex, who outlined an amazing story of George and his World War II story. As I conclude this brief today, there's a broader message wrapped into Remembrance that I think it's worth noting. Yes, it's a time to remember, but it's a time to remember that freedom isn't free, and every decision we make here in this House or within this government has an impact. That doesn't mean we should shy away from difficult decisions to employ our armed forces, but rather acknowledge and champion that our armed forces are there for a reason, to protect us at home and abroad, to protect our way of life, and to ensure the freedom we enjoy today can be passed down to our children and their children's children. They are the guarantors of everything we hold dear. To risk life and limb for one's nation, I think, is the noblest of all traditions. But if service is anything, I think it's above politics, and it's above politics here today. And that's why I stand ready to work with all honourable and right honourable members of the House, so that veterans and those serving can live a life in and outside the armed forces worthy of the incredible contribution they make to this nation within them. And today, in advance of Remembrance Day, we come together united to say thank you to those that have served and to honour all those who have made the ultimate sacrifice.
The question is that this House has considered remembrance and the contribution of veterans. As many as our opinions say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.